Chapter 503. The elder of the Emerson family was probably still wondering why the country's supernatural countermeasure agency, which wasn't, would come knocking on his doors so quickly even though there were no witnesses. Of course, as an old antique who had been abandoned by modern society, he obviously didn't know that there were surveillance cameras everywhere in China. When Xiao Xingyi found that the opponent was a little tricky to deal with, he immediately called Old Su and brought him out. "Don't be afraid, he's alone. All of you, attack together." However, the elder of the Emerson family was an old man who had been through a lot. He knew that if he only thought about running away at a time like this, there was an 80% chance that he would be easily defeated by the enemy due to his panic. Moreover, the other party dared to block the door alone. Other than his own strength, he probably had something else to rely on. The elder of the Emerson family tried to imagine the thoughts of the person blocking the door based on his own experiences over the years. First of all, blocking the door itself had a hint of restricting the exit. Normally, when the only exit door was blocked, even people who didn't feel fear would panic because they had lost their escape route. At the same time, they would subconsciously turn their attention to the windows and other places that could be considered as the second exit. People from different factions would always have some strange bickering mentality. Most of the time, compared to their own side achieving their goal, the other side's failure would make them feel happier. Therefore, under these circumstances, when the other party blocked the door, not only would the young people on his side not fight with all their strength, they would even escape through the windows and other places to satisfy their bickering mentality of fooling the other party and making their actions useless. At times like this, as long as the other party placed their main forces near the windows, they could easily achieve their goal of knocking them out one by one. Not only that, even the people who were preparing to fight inside the room would not only slow down when their attention was distracted by the windows and other places, but they would also feel like their hands and feet were tied. This actually increased the success rate of the other party's blocking tactic. However, this blocking tactic had a shocking and fatal flaw. The person in charge of blocking the door had to endure the first wave of attacks from inside the room to establish their deterrence. Only by doing this would the blocking tactic have a chance of success. Otherwise, in the words of this country, it would just be a laughing stock. In other words, as long as he could defeat the person blocking the door, no matter what the enemy's plan was, it would all be for naught. Admittedly, their group had indeed alerted the supernatural countermeasure organization of this country, but that didn't mean that the game was over. After all, it hadn't been too long since Creed Emerson killed the citizens of this country and brought them back as food. Even this country shouldn't have been able to dispatch too much power to this place in such a short time. In other words, as long as he could avoid this wave of attacks, everything else would be easy to deal with. That was why he gave the order, "Let's go together." That was why he gave the order, "Let's swarm up and defeat those who are blocking the door first." Even if the person who was sent to block the door should have a certain level of strength or trump card, and even gave him the confidence to compete with the vampires were supernatural creatures that were far stronger than humans. This time, with so many of them attacking together, even if they couldn't kill the other party on the spot, they could at least break the other party's defense in one wave. Even if the other party was an existence that was much stronger than ordinary vampires, it should at least be able to make him flustered. When the time came, it wouldn't be difficult for him to take the opportunity to escape. As expected, the moment they swarmed forward, the elders saw a surprised expression on the face of the young man blocking the door. But it turned out that he was overthinking things. In fact, as early as a day ago, the Customs Supervision Department of the Celestial Super Administrative Office had already noticed a large number of supernatural creatures sneaking into the country. At first, the Super Administrative Office was nervous because of this, thinking that the foreign supernatural forces led by the Illuminati were about to make a move against the Celestial Super Administrative Office. But it didn't take long for them to realize that these infiltrators had all gathered in Jiangjin and its surrounding areas. Thus, the group of people in the super administrative office headquarters looked at each other. After a long moment of confusion, the solemn atmosphere of the office on the eve of a great war instantly vanished. The group of bigwigs decided to do what they were supposed to do. Even the supernatural response forces that had begun to be deployed from all over the country were only sent to the provinces and cities around Jiangjin and made into cloth bags to prevent rats from escaping. Not even a single strand of hair was sent to Jiangjin. As the person in charge, Xiao Jingyi was only given the right to access the surveillance footage and the right to requisition the help of civil supernatural enthusiasts at any time. In the words of a certain former person in charge of Jiangjin's super administrative office who did not want to be named, this group of idiots ran to Jiangjin of all places. Let me tell you, this time, if more than a tenth of them can return to China, I'll admit defeat. This was indeed the case. After learning about the general situation from Ding Yang, Su Xinqing had already made a decision. He did not intend to intervene in the battle between the supernatural creatures to seize the Black Knight satellite wreckage and the Dragon Ball shards, but the premise was that these guys had to do it out of the sight of ordinary people. Once someone tried to cause trouble, old Su would immediately take action and physically expel the other party from the world. The group of vampires that Ding Yang said caused the deaths of the two children were obviously the best chickens to be slaughtered for monkeys to see. Especially after the guy named Creed Emerson recklessly continued to kill a few ordinary people, and Xiao Jingyi discovered his lair through the surveillance footage. When Su Xinqing saw the group of vampires swarming towards him, he was surprised. Naturally, it was not because he was flustered that he could not catch them, but because he was genuinely surprised. It had been a long time since he saw someone who was so fearless and could not wait to die. He was very moved. And then he gave the vampires who were fighting alongside him a magnificent death. They were sent flying into the sky by Su Xinqing's cloud-scaled fist, and finally exploded into fireworks due to the magic in their bodies. The Emerson family elder was shocked by this scene. It was not that there were no people in this world who could beat up vampires, but it was the first time in his long ghost life that he had seen someone who could send a dozen vampires flying into the sky and turn them into fireworks as easily as eating grapes. In just one exchange, the Emerson family elder lost more than half of their strength, which they had painstakingly preserved. "Oh, you monster!" With his heart bleeding, the Emerson family elder spread open his cloak and pounced towards Su Xinqing like a giant bat. Then, he was also sent flying into the sky by Su Xinqing's fist and exploded. Even when the entire room was empty, old Su did not realize that there was a Duke-level monster among the vampires who were only Viscount level on average. After doing all this, Su Xinqing took out the phone that had been ringing non-stop, and answered Xiao Jingyi's call. "What's up?" "Just now, a vampire broke through the wall and escaped. I was guarding the window on the other side, and couldn't stop him in time." Just as Xiao Jingyi finished speaking, Su Xinqing also noticed a human-shaped hole in the wall not far from him. "It's okay, he can't escape," Su Xinqing casually assured him. At this time, as long as there were any corpses left, he could use his divine skill, Karma Severance, and kill the escaping vampire as well. "Oh. What's wrong?" "Ah." Su Xinqing's sudden shout startled Xiao Jingyi outside. Our protagonist was half kneeling on the ground, doing the OTZ action. "The corpses were blown up. I forgot to touch the corpses." "No, compared to touching the corpses, catching the escaping vampire is more important, right?" "Shut up. If you don't touch the corpses, how can you be considered a hero? Isn't your definition of a hero a bit strange?" When the dirty fireworks ended, Aoli also planned to leave the room. "Take care of yourself, don't worry, I'll soon refine your hyoid bone and turn you into a human again." After saying that, Aoli jumped out of the window again, and the anti-theft fence outside the window did not work. The four-legged snake Xiuxiu waved its tail, as if it wanted to say something, but in the end, it could not say anything because of its vocal cords. After a while, Shushio seemed to have decided not to care about this matter, and continued to watch the drama. But at this time, the sound of a key being inserted into the door lock came from the entrance. Suddenly, it was shocked, F***ck, why did my poop picker come back so quickly today? At the same time, it desperately ran back to its glass box with its 4 short legs. When it was lying on the wood pretending to be asleep, Su Wei opened the door and turned on the light. Ah, phone. I got it, I didn't take it out. Su Wei rummaged through the sofa, and finally found her phone under a cushion. Then she looked at the glass box as if she was relieved. Shosho, are you being obedient? The 4-legged snake continued to play dead. Su Wei did not mind, after all, many reptiles like to play dead without moving for a long time. Just when she was about to leave, she glanced at the coffee table and stopped. There was a piece of black translucent jade there. The girl curiously picked up the piece of jade, and suddenly the warm feeling of a living creature startled her. Even though she did not know much, the girl was almost certain that this piece of jade was not ordinary. Did Mr. Chen leave it here? She showed a shy expression. Well, I can't help it, after the dinner is over, I'll return it to him. Then, as if she had found a good reason, she nodded in satisfaction and put the jade into her small handbag. After that, she left the house with a rather happy expression. In the darkness, Shushio opened its eyes. The pair of black eyes that should have blended into the darkness were unusually bright at this moment. Chapter 504. This was Chintoa's apartment. Chintoa, who had finally sent the superstar Su Wei home, rubbed his forehead tiredly. Then, he raised his head and looked at the sword spirit of the Son of Heaven's sword floating beside him. So, why did you ask her to leave this thing behind? Chintoa waved the black jade in his hand and asked unhappily. Of course it's because it's filled with a troublemaker. Cough, a wonderful aura. The Son of Heaven's sword answered confidently. I say, can't you be quiet for a while? This kind of thing seems to have epic mission item written all over it. I can't even sleep well if I leave it here. Chintoa pinched the space between his eyebrows and complained. Although he was not a participant in the incident, he was not an idiot. He could clearly feel that the atmosphere on the streets of Jiangjin City was a little strange during this period of time, and there seemed to be a lot of foreigners that he usually did not see. Connecting it to the thing in his hand that was almost engraved with the word troublemaker, he more or less realized that something strange was happening in the dark in the city. Master, you're really too cowardly. If it were up to me, the more you participate in this kind of thing, the stronger you can become, right? The Son of Heaven's sword shouted from the side. Don't you just need to shave all your hair to become stronger? Chintoa retorted indifferently. Master, where did you learn this kind of twisted logic? Of course it's from the strongest person in Jiangjin. For some reason, when they talked about this topic, the two of them felt a chill run down their backs at the same time. After thinking for a moment, Chintoa decided to change the topic to prevent himself from dying from an unknown AoE. So, what exactly is this thing? I don't know. The Son of Heaven's sword put its hands on its hips and answered confidently. At this moment, Chintoa began to seriously consider whether he could give up his identity as master. But judging from the material, it's somewhat similar to a demon core. Fortunately, the Son of Heaven's sword was not really useless to this extent. In the end, it still gave a subtle answer. Demon core. Chintoa frowned. Is it something similar to the magic crystal on the magical beasts in novels? More or less, but demon cores are formed by spiritual energy. Son of Heaven's sword nodded and replied, Master, if you really find it troublesome, why don't you just throw this thing to the strongest person in Jiangjin? For the time being. Chintoa considered for a while, but in the end, he rejected the suggestion of selling the jade to the Son of Heaven. Instead, he handed the jade to the Son of Heaven. Because you said that this thing might be a Yao core formed by spiritual chi, and you're a sword spirit, I thought it was probably something similar, so I gave it a try. I didn't expect it to work, Chintua said casually. I'll praise you. The Son of Heaven's sword said proudly. Praise my ass. Stop playing around and put this thing away. Put it away. Put it away where? The sword spirit girl tilted her head and asked. Dig a hole and bury it. Chintua answered without hesitation. Go find a random flower pot and bury this thing. Why? I'm a godly sword, not a military shovel. The sword spirit girl protested unhappily. If you don't go. Chintua did not waver at all in the face of the sword spirit girl's protest. My words. The girl frowned and repeated it like a recorder. I'll stick a tattoo of a Xiongwu on your sword. And it's a light version. It's just digging a hole. I'll go right away. Master, please wait for a moment. You're saying that other than me, there's someone else in Jiangjin who's looking for trouble with those foreign demons. In Sakura's apartment, Su Xinqing, who hadn't enjoyed red braised pork in a long time, couldn't help but widen his eyes when he heard Xiao Jingyi's words. Ah, that's right. Xiao Jingyi hurriedly nodded his head. The key is that the guy's actions are clean and efficient. Almost all of the foreign demons who were attacked were defeated in a single exchange. It's as if they didn't even see who the attacker was. Don't touch that piece of meat. After Su Xinqing saved a piece of pork rib from Xiao Jingyi's chopsticks, he didn't have time to enjoy it before Mo Li, who was beside him, bit off the meat along with the chopsticks. Looking at the expressionless Mo Li who was chewing on the meat, bone, and chopsticks, Su Xinqing could only put down the chopsticks in his hand and ask Xiao Jingyi, does this have anything to do with me? If you really want to say it, it doesn't. Xiao Jingyi's teeth were also chattering because of Mo Li's words, then he continued, but a lot of the demons disguised themselves as foreigners to sneak into Jiangjin. The attackers' actions caused rumors to spread that there's a bandit group targeting foreigners in Jiangjin. This made the police very passive. The bandits are foreigners, right? Su Xinqing scoffed at this. These are all matters that we deal with. Ordinary people in the government don't know about this. Xiao Jingyi said with some hesitation, since the crooked friend was attacked, isn't it normal to put pressure on the police department to solve the case quickly? After all, he used to work in the police department, so Xiao Jingyi was very familiar with this topic. Maybe it's those foreigners doing the dirty work. Su Xinqing really didn't want to care about this mess. How about I blow them all up in one go? Don't, if you really do that, those foreigners will probably complain. Xiao Jingyi saw that Su Xinqing was getting tired of it, so he didn't continue to urge him. After eating enough, he took the initiative to leave. Anyway, if there's any progress, I'll let you know. Go, go. Su Xinqing waved his hand to chase him away. Landlord. At this time, Mo Li stopped chewing and called out in a muffled voice. He turned his head and stared at old Su. What's the matter? Su Xinqing asked curiously. Achoo. Then Mo Li sneezed, causing old Su's face to be covered in wood. It's nothing. Mo Li continued to eat. After a while, he said, let's talk. Hey. This was the deepest underground parking lot in Jiangjin. At this time, a group of foreign supernatural creatures had activated a magic barrier to prevent detection and were gathered here for a meeting. The person in charge of the meeting was a middle-aged white male with a manticore body. First of all, I must thank all of you for coming. Although we're all rivals in this competition for the Black Knight, I have something very important to announce to all of you. He stood on the sunroof of a BMW and looked down at the gathered dark creatures. Although only about 40% of the people have received the invitation and responded to my invitation, I believe that some of you have already found the remains of the Black Knight. However, what I want to talk about today is not that, but that in this city, there are people who are treating us as prey and are wantonly hunting us. His words were like a small stone that stirred up 1,000 waves. As soon as he finished speaking, the noise of the crowd filled the entire barrier. Indeed, although the lack of spirit energy caused the supernatural creatures in the world to be unable to recover, this kind of open hunting of supernatural creatures was rarely seen after the Middle Ages. Who would have thought that such a thing would happen in this far eastern country? Of course, these people didn't know that the demons in the country had been living in this kind of deep water and fire since ancient times. Even in the modern era, there were still many cultivators who caught demons to make pills. This is a provocation to everyone here, to us superhumans. Can you tolerate those mortals seeing us as lowly beasts? The middle-aged white male used a rather provocative tone to shout loudly. No. We can't. The demons who were incited by him let out angry voices together. Some of them had probably participated in demonstrations before, and their actions were very well rehearsed. Of course, these demons were all small demons from remote countries. The demons who really had some inheritance more or less knew about the situation in China since ancient times, so they didn't come to this kind of gathering. That's right. How can we be trampled on like this? We need to unite, and then give some people in this country of yellow monkeys a heavy blow, and let them know who is the master of this world. When the manticore saw that the effect was so good, he immediately further instigated. Naturally, the miscellaneous demons became even more agitated. This made the manticore feel a little proud in his heart. He had no interest in punishing people who attacked other demons. In fact, he wished that there were fewer people competing with him. The only purpose of holding this gathering was to coerce these idiots who believed in him, so that he could gain a more advantageous position in the next competition. That was all. Now, let me register your races and abilities. Then, let us surprise this world. As he spoke, he showed a self-proclaimed handsome but rather evil smile. But from beginning to end, he didn't know that there was an eye on the wall watching his every move. Below the abandoned dormitory in the mountains behind Jiangjin, the earth god Lowly sighed deeply. It seems that the troublesome matters have increased. Then, she shifted her gaze to Ding Yang, who was looking at her expectantly, and said, I have some news that I need you to send out. Chapter 505. Since the manticore dared to gather those stragglers, he naturally had his own trump card. In fact, even though the manticore pretended to be open and honest, he didn't share all the information he had with the other evil creatures. There was still a lot of information that he had in his hands. For example, the hunter actually attacked those who had the fragments of the Black Knight's remains. Even though it wasn't clear how the hunter determined who had the fragments, there was no doubt that those who had the fragments were his targets. And the manticore himself also had a fragment. In other words, he was also the hunter's target. This was because the ambushers were from a vampire family like Immersens. Even though manticores were relatively powerful monsters, they were only slightly stronger than most vampires. It would be difficult for them to win against multiple vampires, let alone 3 of them at once. At the very least, he didn't have the confidence to win against a vampire family with a marquis at the helm. But now that he had gathered more than 40 evil creatures, not only did he have the power to protect himself, he even had the confidence to fight against the Immerse family at their peak. Even the hunter who stole the fragments from the supernatural creatures was definitely not a match for this group. But even if he had the confidence to win, he couldn't be careless. The manticore relied on this vigilance to survive until now. After all, his goal was to control this power and eventually obtain all the fragments of the Black Knight. Now, dealing with the hunter was only the first step of this plan. He needed a beautiful victory to make these disunited evil creatures have a considerable degree of trust in him. From what I know, the hunter seems to be very careful not to expose himself. He never attacked during the day and also doesn't move in places with more humans. This gives us a considerable advantage. At the same time, I guess that the hunter's target should be the fragments. In other words, we can use the fragments as bait to lure them into our trap step by step. As soon as he said that, there was a slight commotion among the evil creatures below. Judging others by their own standards, the manticore naturally knew what they were clamoring about. So he cleared his throat and continued, "Please don't worry, I don't intend to ask you to hand over the fragments you have. Of course, I'm not so kind as to take out my own fragment. But it just so happens that I know the location of a fragment. Let's use that fragment as bait and reward the person who contributed the most. What do you think?" His suggestion immediately gained the support of the evil creatures. The manticore's gaze fell on a vampire in the corner. Creed Emerson, the survivor of the Emerson family who had escaped from Sushinching. He was also the beginning of everything. In fact, nearly half of the information about the manticore was obtained from this fellow. Are you sure the information is correct? As they left the underground parking lot, the manticore approached Creed Emerson once more and asked in a low voice. "That's right. I left the scent of my blood on that fragment. I was just going to take a rest before chasing it back. I didn't expect something like that to happen." Creed Emerson was hiding in the shadows. His voice sounded rather sinister and terrifying. "That's good. Don't worry, we'll definitely avenge you and your family." The manticore then patted him on the shoulder and said with a kind face. "Humph, I hope so." Creed Emerson replied with a cold snort. The manticore then turned around and left. To him, Creed Emerson's cold attitude was normal. If the latter had suddenly become enthusiastic, he would have felt that something was wrong. But until he left, he did not notice that Creed Emerson had a disdainful sneer on his face hidden under the cloak. "You want to defeat that monster with just this motley crew of 40? What a joke. But without these small fries, I wouldn't be able to take revenge even if I wanted to. For the time being, I'll just make use of them." Brother Dragon was performing a divine dance. To be precise, he was performing a divine dance on the rooftop of the tallest building in Jiangjin. To be more precise, he was performing a ritual passed down from generation to generation in the Dragon clan to strengthen his senses so that he could sense the location of his cousin's Dragon Ball fragment. He had previously used this method to determine the location of the Dragon Ball fragment. Coupled with his strength as a 1,000-year-old dragon, it was easy for him to snatch the fragment from the hands of those foreign supernatural creatures. The height of nearly 50 floors caused the wind to howl all year round. In fact, other than the staff who installed the billboards, basically no one would come to this place. At this time, a figure suddenly jumped up from behind the building. Aoli immediately stopped his movements and looked at the newcomer with vigilance. "You're the one who's been causing trouble in Jiangjin recently?" After receiving the report from the Earth God, Su Xinxing, who had specially rushed over, asked with an unfriendly expression. "I'm not causing any trouble, I'm just cleaning up some foreign monsters. Moreover, I chose to do it in the dead of night, in a desolate place. What's wrong with that?" Aoli replied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. No. Isn't that already considered causing trouble?" Su Xinxing immediately ridiculed. "The Dragon Ball belongs to my younger brother. I'm just returning something that belongs to my family to its rightful owner. Is that also wrong?" Aoli continued to refute. Su Xinxing thought about it and felt that it would be too troublesome to convince the other party. Therefore, he simply gave Aoli a beating again. At least give me a reason to be beaten up." The Dragon King, who was beaten black and blue by old Su again, wanted to cry but had no tears. He didn't know how this wound worked, but it couldn't be cured with magic. I'm just warning you, don't always mess around. Old Sue replied calmly. Wait a minute, I think you're the only one who has no right to say that I'm messing around. Su Xinxing cracked his knuckles. No, it's nothing. Aoli immediately cowered. In short, it seems that some crooked monsters have gathered recently and are planning to trap you. Don't be so stupid as to walk into it. After finishing what he had to do, Old Sue walked to the edge of the rooftop, and then, without waiting for Aoli to speak, he jumped down against the howling wind. After that, because someone took a picture of him, it suddenly became popular in Jiangjin as an urban ghost story of someone jumped off a building but couldn't see the corpse. That was another story. Chapter 506. Aoli had caught a cold. To be honest, even Su Xinxing was very surprised. This was the first time he had seen Aoli fall sick in the past few years. Well, even a person who could destroy a star with one strike died of a heart attack. No one said that the Devil King couldn't fall sick, right? All in all, the whole Sakura Apartments was busy because of this. Of course, this was excluding the dog girl and Dehei who didn't know what was going on, as well as Yu Xingjing who knew what was going on but couldn't help much. Su Xinxing didn't have time to care about other things. He only went to remind Brother Dragon after Earth Loli sent Ding Yang to inform him. As for what happened after that, he didn't know. After he finally coaxed Aoli to sleep, he had time to make something to fill his stomach. Although it didn't matter if he didn't eat, Su Xinxing could feel that he was still alive by maintaining normal human physiological behavior. Now, little Chiketsu was looking after Aoli. Chihaya Fukuyama was also there to help. After all, when Aoli woke up in a bad mood, Su Xinxing was probably the only one in the whole Sakura Apartments who had two types of divinity at the same time. Asahi Sakura Kanji was ordered by Chihaya Fukuyama to go out to buy supplies, mainly food. Unlike other patients who had a poor appetite after catching a cold, Aoli still ate the most food in Sakura Apartments even when he was sick. In fact, if the little guy was allowed to eat to his heart's content, he might be able to eat more than everyone else in Sakura Apartments combined. Qin Xingyan left on her flying sword because she thought that normal cold medicine wouldn't work on Aoli. Therefore, she planned to go to Spirit Mountain and Great River to look for medicine to cure Aoli's illness. Although Su Xinxing thought that the so-called medicine was probably useless, Su Xinxing didn't stop Qin Xingyan from doing it out of kindness. Until now, Su Xinxing still hadn't figured out why Aoli was sick. However, he felt that the most likely reason was the seal. After the third stage was unlocked, the seal on Aoli's body had not been activated again. Although Su Xinxing had always thought that it wasn't good to let Aoli continue like this, he didn't care too much because nothing had happened. It seemed like it would be better to take Aoli to other worlds to find that guy after this matter was over. With this thought in mind, Old Su finished his fried rice in a few mouthfuls. He threw the plate into the sink and sat down on the sofa. Turning on the TV, Su Xinxing found that the news seemed to be broadcasting a natural gas pipeline explosion in a nearby apartment. I remember that the guy called Tuwa seems to live in this apartment. Is it a coincidence? Because of his relationship with Jasmine, in a sense, Su Xinxing had lost contact with the outside world for 2 days. He also didn't know what the current situation of the battle for the Dragon Balls, which had caused a huge uproar 2 days ago. Thinking of this, Su Xinxing took out his phone and wanted to call Xiao Jingyi, but found that the phone was out of battery. So annoying, so he could only patiently look for a charger. After charging a little and turning on the phone, he found that there were several missed calls, all from Xiao Jingyi. This made Old Su feel a little bad. Logically speaking, if Xiao Jingyi couldn't get through to him, he should come directly to him, but he didn't see him for 2 days. So he put away his phone and rushed directly to the police station. When he arrived at the office, he found that the office doors and windows were closed, and there was no one inside. After asking a random police officer, Su Xinxing found out that Xiao Jingyi hadn't come to work for 2 days in a row. It seemed that the situation was indeed a bit troublesome. After noticing this, Su Xinxing rushed to Xiao Jingyi's house without stopping. However, Xiao Jingyi's house was guarded by iron guards. Old Su broke in from the balcony with great difficulty, but found that the inside looked like it had been ransacked. It was a mess. Most of the home appliances and furniture had turned into wreckage, and a small part of them had disappeared. Could it be that Xiao Jingyi finally couldn't stand these guys anymore, so he killed them all? Su Xinxing said to himself. But then he sighed again. Sure enough, it's still impossible. In addition, the spirit energy in this room was a lot weaker, and there was also the stench of creatures that didn't belong to humans, so something must have happened to Xiao Jingyi. It seems that the previous news wasn't normal either. Thinking of this, Su Xinxing no longer hesitated and went directly to Chen Tuo's apartment. Sure enough, he found that the place where the explosion happened was not somewhere else, but Chen Tuo's room. Su Xinxing tried to ask the surrounding residents about Chen Tuo's whereabouts, but unfortunately, Chen Tuo didn't seem to communicate much with the neighbors, so the residents didn't know where Chen Tuo moved to. Now that the clues were almost cut off, the situation became a little troublesome. At this time, Mo Li was still sick in bed and couldn't help. At this time, Su Xinxing, who was at his wit's end, found a blind spot in his thinking. Although the super administrative office was Xiao Jingyi's home ground, and Xiao Jingyi was also the head of the super administrative office in Jiangjin, in fact, there should be another police officer in the super administrative office besides Xiao Jingyi. Fang Xiaoqing. This girl, who usually didn't have much of a presence, might be the breakthrough in the current situation. Therefore, Su Xinxing immediately rushed back to the police station, sneaked into the physics archive room, and flipped through Fang Xiaoqing's file. After confirming the address of this FRB, he immediately rushed over there. Fang Xiaoqing's home was a large villa in a wealthy neighborhood. However, Fang Xiaoqing wasn't at home now, and there was only a nanny at home. Feeling that he didn't have much time to waste, Su Xinxing simply used negotiation, physics, to get the information he wanted from the other party. Fang Xiaoqing seemed to have been going to the hospital for the past 2 days. Therefore, after Su Xinxing made her lose her memory, physics, he rushed to the hospital again. After rushing back and forth for half a day in Jiangjin, he finally had some results. In a corridor of the hospital, he saw Fang Xiaoqing. Just as Su Xinxing was still hesitating whether to greet the other party suddenly turned into an intensive care unit. Su Xinxing was slightly stunned, then followed in. Fang Xiaoqing, who was sitting by the bed with red eyes, heard someone come in. She just looked up indifferently and lowered her head. Su Xinxing found that the person lying on the bed, unconscious and wrapped in bandages, was one of his few friends in Jiangjin, Xiao Jingyi. Chapter 507. A.O. Li looked at the suspected abandoned subway station in front of him and frowned slightly. This was a relatively remote and desolate place on the outskirts of Jiangjin. Although there had been a slight deviation in the river course over the years, causing him to be a little further away from Jiangjin, he would still come back from time to time for various reasons. As far as he could remember, such a building did not exist. However, after strengthening his perception through the ritual passed down from generation to generation, he could be sure that this was the place where the last fragment was located. So no matter whether this was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, he would explore it. Although the former was equivalent to his home in a sense. When he walked into the underground building, he realized that he was still wrong. Although it looked like a subway station on the outside, it was not the case when he walked in. The underground space was narrow and dim, and it did not feel as empty as a subway station. Not only that, but even the surrounding could only be seen compacted soil and stones. The ground was also bumpy, and there was no paved slope. There was no sense of civilization in the entire tunnel. Rather than calling it a subway platform, it would be better to call it an underground city. Although Aoi did not have much interest in Western video games, he still knew some of the game elements, such as the more famous Dungeons and Dragons. If he thought about it carefully, his opponents were indeed the demons from the Western countries. It did not seem strange that they would create such a habitat. Now, all that was left was to see what was hidden inside. It really is Dungeons and Dragons. Although the dragons are not the same. Aoi muttered and continued to move forward without fear. It was not that he was overconfident or anything, but for him, other than the famous mythical monsters, the other monsters were really nothing. This could be seen from the fact that he could snatch the Dragon Ball fragments from various forces in a relatively short period of time without any injuries. Just as he was moving forward, the ground under his feet suddenly softened as if he had stepped into a swamp. Immediately afterward, the swamp wrapped around his upper body as if it had a life of its own. Sludge monster. Aoi reached out his hand and blew up half of the sludge monster. However, the remaining sludge monster was still wrapped around his right foot. Almost at the same time, the surrounding walls suddenly opened, and several black shadows attacked him from all directions. "You're courting death." Aoi let out a furious roar. His spiritual energy poured out in torrents and directly destroyed those silhouettes. However, the enemies continued to surround him from the surrounding entrances. Human wave tactics. If they were on flat ground, Aoi, who could ride on the clouds, would be able to take care of these small fries. But now, he was trapped in a narrow tunnel, and he could not even use 30% to 40% of his exquisite cultivation. However, he was still a dragon king who had lived for over 1,000 years. If one thought that he could be trapped to death in such a narrow place, then they were underestimating him. "If you want to surround me, at least send a brigade of monsters." Aoi's casual clothes instantly turned into his Dragon King robe. He waved his sleeves, and a torrent of water appeared out of thin air. In an instant, half of the underground city was flooded. Most of the monsters surrounding him were not good at swimming. Even if there were one or two that could swim, most of them were only at the level of doggy paddling. Instantly, the dangerous situation was turned around. However, just as Aoi was about to pull his leg out of the pit, he staggered. An uncontrollable dizziness invaded his mind. That sludge monster was poisonous. But theoretically speaking, poisons in the mortal world were ineffective against him. Before Aoi could figure out what had happened, a figure who was enchanted with a water escape spell, which was actually magic, rushed in front of Aoi. Aoi tried his best to resist the dizziness. At the same time, he stretched out his finger and controlled the water around him to turn into a sharp sword that pierced towards the opponent. The opponent did not dodge and took the sword head-on. Instantly, blood gushed out of its chest like a fountain. But at the same time, the opponent's goal was achieved. The moment Aoi attacked, it met Aoi's gaze. Instantly, Aoi's body stiffened. "This is petrification." Hearing Aoi's words, the opponent, who was already seriously injured, grinned wickedly. Because the humanization was not complete, snake-like scales appeared on the opponent's face, and the hair on its head was red like a mohawk. This was a snake-tailed chicken. But mere petrification could not defeat Aoi, who had both dragon blood and the title of god. Almost in a moment, the powerful recovery ability of Eastern dragons began to work, and the symptoms of petrification began to be alleviated. However, just as Aoi's attention was focused on the snake-tailed chicken, a strange scorpion tail quietly emerged from the ground and stabbed Aoi's back when he was unprepared. Cool. With the injection of venom, even Aoli finally began to be unable to bear it. He staggered and half knelt on the ground. Then, the snake-tailed manticore broke out of the ground and looked at its new prey with a smile. Welcome, hunter. How does it feel to be the prey instead? In order to hunt you, we spent a lot of effort to complete this great trap. He laughed and said, although I'd like to hear your feelings at the moment, there seems to be a saying in your ancient country, the more you talk, the more you lose. I know that even my venom, which is effective on gods, can't completely destroy your body, so you must want to buy time to recover, right? Unfortunately, I won't give you this opportunity. Then his face turned cold, and he ordered the snake-tailed chicken, kill him. The snake-tailed chicken, who had received the order, immediately revealed its sharp claws excitedly and scratched at the immobile Aoli. But the moment its claws were about to touch Aoli, many silk threads invisible to the naked eye seemed to appear. They wrapped around the snake-tailed chicken, and then gradually tightened, and finally completely twisted it into pieces of meat. The snake-tailed manticore was stunned for a moment, and then said to Aoli in shock and anger, "What did you do?" At the same time, it stretched out its long scorpion tail whip again, as if to strangle Aoli. But almost at the next moment, it followed in the footsteps of the snake-tailed chicken, and was twisted into pieces of meat. After that, the remaining fiendish demons also encountered a similar situation. No matter whether they fled, cursed, or begged, they did not receive any response. Just like that, they died abruptly, strangely, and completely in front of Aoli. Even some races with strong vitality and recovery abilities were no exception. What is this? In the end, only Aoli was left in the entire underground city with a confused look. What's going on? It's a killing method that follows the karma line. At the entrance of the underground city, a person spoke loudly. Aoli looked over and found that the person who spoke was actually Su Shinxing. But for some reason, he felt that this Su Shinxing in front of him was somewhat out of place. Apart from the clothes on his body which were rather exotic, it seemed that he also had more hair. He only heard Su Shinxing continue, "I didn't expect that other than me, there's actually someone else who knows this kind of trick, what?" Aoli continued to look confused. "Forget it, I don't have much to say to an NPC like you. I have more important things to do." Saying that, Su Shinxing looked at the city area not far away, where there were many tall buildings. 10 kilometers away, in Sakura Apartments, Chihaya Fukuyama and Chiketsu, who were in a mess because of Aoli's sudden high fever, didn't notice that the little girl lying on the bed had her eyes tightly closed, as if she was having a nightmare. She had a pained expression as she softly murmured, "Landlord," as if responding to the call from 10 kilometers away. Su Shinxing spoke with a soft but firm voice. "Kill the last demon king." Chapter 508. Chihaya, Nasan. Is Aoli Nasan getting worse? Chiketsu asked Chihaya Fukuyama worriedly as she looked at Aoli, who was tossing and turning on the bed, mumbling something in an incomprehensible language. That. Chiketsu, you must be tired, right? Do you want to take a rest first? I'll take care of things here. Chihaya Fukuyama's reaction to this was somewhat ambiguous. She naturally knew that Aoli's symptoms had indeed worsened. In fact, Aoli's human form was originally created through magic. Her body temperature was much lower than a human's, and if one were to look for a comparison, it would probably only be slightly warmer than vampires who were close to the undead. However, Aoli's condition had changed. Although it was not obvious, her body temperature had already risen to a rather high level. If not for Chihaya Fukuyama secretly using her divine power to lower the room temperature, the room would have already turned into an oven. If she took out the thermometer now, it would probably explode not long after touching Aoli's body. Although the current temperature could still be maintained for a period of time, after a while, the air above Jasmine would probably distort due to the high temperature, just like the air above the roads during the hottest days of summer. If it was even more extreme, it might even appear like a mirage. At this moment, there was the sound of the door opening. Following that, even though the door was closed, one could still hear the dog girl's unique energetic greeting. It seemed that Asahi Sakura Kanji had returned. After a short while, the maid entered the room as expected. As Chihaya Fukuyama's maid, Sakura Kanji naturally noticed that Mo Lee's condition was not normal. Moreover, Chihaya Fukuyama was constantly hinting at her with his eyes. Miss Chikatsu, Chihaya, Sama and I are enough to take care of things here. You should go and rest first. Thus, she went straight to the point and suggested to Chikatsu. Seeing that Chikatsu seemed to want to refute her, she continued, Mr. Su should be back soon. When he sees how tired you are, he will definitely be distressed. Oh, I know. Since Asahi Sakura Kanji had even brought up his most respected elder brother, Chikatsu naturally could not continue to stay here. You must take good care of Mo Lee, okay? Of course, come, let me take you to rest. After Asahi Sakura Kanji took Chikatsu away, Chihaya Fukuyama finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was only at this moment that she noticed that the towel on Jasmine's head had already completely evaporated. Hot. When Chihaya Fukuyama's hand touched Mo Lee's head, it made a sizzling sound similar to teppanyaki. If Chihaya Fukuyama was not a deity, her fingers would have been scalded in that instant. The temperature is actually this high. This is not good. The basin. Is it in the bathroom? After taking off the towel, Chihaya Fukuyama remembered that she had brought the basin to the bathroom earlier to fill it with water, but forgot to bring it over. Thus, she could only take the towel and leave the room, heading to the bathroom. It wasn't until she walked into the bathroom that she suddenly remembered that she also had the bloodline of the water god. Although the water god's incomplete divinity had been mostly devoured by the war god's divinity, if it was a relatively simple ability like creating water, she could still use it. Really, it's completely useless now that I think about it. Since they were already in the bathroom, Chihaya Fukuyama was too lazy to create water, and directly took some water from the tap. At this time, there was the sound of the door opening near the entrance. This made Chihaya Fukuyama involuntarily poke her head out to take a look. She found that it was actually Su Xinxing who had returned. It was just that Su Xinxing's clothes were a bit strange now, full of a strange and exotic style. However, after experiencing so many things, Chihaya Fukuyama also knew that Su Xinxing was a special existence. No matter what happened to him, it would not be strange, so she just casually walked out of the bathroom. Yo, you're finally back. After drying her hands on her apron, Chihaya Fukuyama greeted Su Xinxing. However, Su Xinxing did not respond to her, but instead walked over step by step. Then, Chihaya Fukuyama saw a canine girl, who had a vigilant expression on her face. What's wrong? This made Chihaya Fukuyama unable to help but ask. He's not little Su. He's someone I don't know. Canine girl shouted. What are you talking about? Chihaya Fukuyama subconsciously wanted to refute, but for some reason, she suddenly felt that the Su Xinxing in front of her did indeed give her a subtle sense of incongruity. Just as she was trying to figure out where this sense of incongruity came from, the other party suddenly rushed forward, pulled out a long sword from behind his back, and slashed at Chihaya Fukuyama. Oh! Chihaya Fukuyama reflexively used her divine power to set up an invisible barrier in front of her. The power of a god was insurmountable for mortals, just like spitting at the sky would only end up on one's face. Any weapon used by mortals to attack the barrier created by divine power would be ineffective. However, Su Xinxing was clearly not within the range of being ineffective. It was almost a face-to-face confrontation. The other party broke Chihaya Fukuyama's divine power barrier, and forcefully chopped the girl to the ground. If it weren't for the Einherjar's power that allowed the girl to instinctively avoid her vital parts, the sword would have ended her life. Seeing this, Canine Girl also rushed towards the other party, but Su Shinxing threw a backhand punch at her. After knocking over the sofa in the living room, she fell silent. After that, Su Shinxing once again chased after Chihaya Fukuyama. Just as Chihaya Fukuyama was about to accept her fate, a red light blocked her way. However, it was useless. The red light was directly cut in half by Su Shinxing's sword. However, even though it was only a slight delay, Qin Xingyan, who had just arrived, managed to drag Chihaya Fukuyama away with blood spurting out of his mouth, risking his life to repair his flying sword and damaging it. However, before the girl could ask Chihaya what happened, she was nailed to the wall by the remains of the flying sword that Su Shinxing threw out. She screamed and fainted. Perhaps because of Qin Xingyan's interruption, Su Shinxing forgot about Chihaya Fukuyama. He walked slowly through the corridor and finally arrived at Mo Li's room. "Finally found you." Looking at Mo Li, who was lying on the bed with a pained expression but showed no signs of waking up, Su Shinxing slowly raised his sword. The moment the sword was swung down, it was caught by a hand. It was indeed the right decision to rush back immediately after sensing that the sanctuary's protection had been destroyed. Su Shinxing looked coldly at the Su Shinxing in front of him, whose appearance was almost identical to his own, and said in a deep voice, "All right. Although I don't know what you are, you should be prepared to be beaten up for messing up my house like this, little brat." Chapter 509. After killing all the evil creatures in Jiangjin through the karma threads on Xiao Xingyi, who was lying in the hospital bed, before Su Shinxing had time to recover from his serious mode, he felt that a strange force had cut a hole in the protection of the Holy Land outside Sakura apartment. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. After telling Fang Xiaoqing a few words, he immediately rushed back to Sakura apartment, only to see the tragic scene. In fact, since the end of the incident 3 years ago, Su Shinxing's mood fluctuations had tended to calm down. There was basically no situation of great sadness or joy. Even most of his usual expressions were revealed according to the atmosphere at that time. Therefore, many people who did not have a deep friendship with Su Shinxing would feel that he was relatively cold. This could not be helped. After all, for various reasons, Su Shinxing's most truthful feelings could no longer be shown. If he showed anger in the true sense, the Earth and even the solar system would collapse because they could not bear or were not qualified to bear this anger. If he showed happiness in the true sense, the will of everything would be distorted and they would begin to indulge in meaningless joy. If he showed sadness in the true sense, then the entire world would be denied and completely turned into nothingness. He was never allowed to show his true feelings. This was also the price he had to bear after obtaining almost invincible power. Back then, after Su Shinxing understood this, he still chose to bring Mo Li back to the fragile world where he was born and raised, and spend the rest of his life here. But at this moment, Su Shinxing was really a little angry. Of course, it was only a fleeting, incomparably illusory wisp of anger. Before this wisp of anger caused harm to the world, Su Shinxing had already suppressed it deep in his heart and restored his previous cold expression. However, the other party obviously did not understand this. Do you think you can stop me by imitating my appearance and making a golem?" Su Shinxing snorted coldly. With a whoosh, he pulled back his long sword from old Su's hand. It was not until this time that Su Shinxing suddenly realized that the other party's sword was also somewhat similar to Roland Duel. Furthermore, he recognized the sword that he had once wielded. Origin's sacred sword, Elijah, the creation holy sword that was formed from the 12 holy swords, possessed the power to split the heavens and earth and kill both gods and demons. At that time, Su Shinqing broke through the 9,000 lattice worlds and collected the 12 holy swords. He only succeeded in fusing them on the eve of the battle against the great devil realm. At that time, Su Shinqing felt that he would definitely be able to defeat the Devil King and end the sorrow of countless worlds. However, the power of creation was no match for the final Demon King. This holy sword that carried the last hope of all worlds was finally broken by the final Demon King in the war of the Great Devil Realm. Su Shinqing himself also died in that battle. If it was not for the holy sword of Hades, Vandaljo who resurrected him, his journey of salvation would have ended there. During Su Shinqing's 1,000-year bloody life that was lost along with the Great Devil Realm, the origin sacred sword, Elijah, that only existed for 3 days could only be regarded as a fleeting moment. However, it undoubtedly had a rather special meaning among all the weapons that Su Shinqing once wielded. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that it was the predecessor of Su Shinqing's current weapon, final sacred sword, Roland Duel, was enough for him to engrave it in his heart. Golem, after a moment of absent-mindedness, Su Shinqing immediately approached the other party again. He needed to figure out what the other party's situation was. If it was from the past, then he could only beat it up and throw it back. If it was from a parallel world, then he would deal with it after beating it up. If it was just an illusion created by someone, then he would kill it directly, go to hell. Probably due to the same overflowing confidence as when Su Shinqing obtained the origin sacred sword, that Su Shinqing, on the opposite side, almost did not hesitate to slash at Su Shinqing again. That sword already carried a considerable degree of power, and there was even a transparent flame near the tip of the blade that only appeared when it cut through the world's barrier. From this point alone, except for Su Shinqing and Immerse, this guy was already invincible in this world. This could not go on. The world where Earth was located was still very fragile. Back then, Su Shinqing did not even dare to casually take out the final sacred sword. Although the destructive power of the origin sacred sword was far less than that of the final sacred sword, they were essentially the same and were not things that a simple world could withstand. Now, this was because Su Shinqing, on the opposite side, had not fully mastered the origin sacred sword. Otherwise, a casual swing of the sword would probably be able to reach the level of the Sword of Truth, the decisive weapon prepared by the rebel prince near the Mid-Serta world. This kind of attack through the law was a unique ability of the origin sacred sword. Even the final sacred sword could not do this. So after understanding this point, Su Shinqing immediately caught the sword with his bare hands and once again caught the other party's attack. Then he slid his hind legs on the floor and his body fell back. Because Su Shinqing, on the opposite side, did not let go of the hilt of the origin sacred sword, Su Shinqing was forcibly dragged into the extra-dimensional crack on the floor that he slid open. After doing all this, Su Shinqing did not close the crack. Without Immerse, it was difficult for him to grasp the coordinates of Earth by himself. In addition, the Sanctum's blessing of Sakura apartment, which was a permanent teleportation point, was also cut open. Without this emergency method, Su Shinqing naturally did not dare to casually throw himself into the extra-dimensional crack. Su Shinqing, on the opposite side, was unsurprisingly angry. If it's really the past me, it's really a pity. Su Shinqing sighed helplessly and reached out again to catch the other party's slash with the origin sacred sword. However, this time, he did not catch the sword with his bare hands. Instead, he did it with just 2 fingers. Even with the origin sacred sword, you only have this kind of strength. It seems that I have to be glad that you're not me. What? Me. Are you trying to use this kind of words to disturb my thoughts? Perhaps seeing that ordinary attacks were ineffective against Su Shinqing, the other party cautiously distanced himself from Su Shinqing in the extra-dimensional world. It seemed that he wanted to use some kind of move to determine the winner in one go. At this moment, Su Shenqing's eyebrows twitched, and an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Wait, could it be? No, don't use that move. Did you notice it? But it's too late. Take this, 3 great brilliant swordsmanship profundity, sword realm, limitless end. However, at this moment, Su Shenqing had already swung out an extremely powerful sword attack that was similar to an Iaido slash. I told you not to use such a childish move. Isn't this a move that reminds me of such a shameful memory? Ah. In the end, Su Shenqing's fist easily penetrated the other party's swordsmanship, and he directly punched Su Shenqing on the opposite side into a mosaic. Chapter 5:10. Disappeared. Su Shenqing looked at the gradually fading mosaic and couldn't help but frown slightly. Although he had been careful to show mercy when he attacked, if it was really him from that era, the punch just now would have caused about 100,000 tons of damage, but at most, it would have only stunned him for a moment. The fact that he would be beaten into a mosaic and disappear was almost enough to prove that the other party was not his past self who had traveled to this era. However, the strange thing was that although Su Shenqing could confirm that there was indeed one or a few existences in this world who seemed to be very hostile to him and even secretly caused trouble several times, it was still far from enough to say that they could break the protection of the Holy Land. Moreover, those existences seemed to be used to being high and mighty and criticizing things they didn't like before destroying them. All of this was based on the fact that their strength was far beyond the strength of the things they were hostile to. Previously, the power that Su Shenqing had shown was enough to make those existences wary and even fearful. It was almost impossible for those existences to take the risk of angering Su Shenqing and killing them directly. Unless they had experienced something that was enough to change a person's beliefs like Su Shenqing and their strength had exceeded a certain threshold, it was almost inevitable that the stronger they were, the more afraid they would be of death. Even if they took 100 steps back and took 1,000 steps back, there was probably no one in this world who could break the protection of the Holy Land, except for himself and Emily. To put it in an extreme way, even if the Earth exploded, the solar system was destroyed, and the galaxy was destroyed, the protection of the Holy Land, and the Sakura apartments inside it would not be affected in the slightest. Those existences naturally couldn't do that. Now that he thought about it, he had a rough guess as to why this Su Shenqing, who was only similar in appearance and strength to his past self, would appear. After walking out of the extra-dimensional space and returning to Sakura Apartments, Su Shenqing first helped Emily change the wet wipe on his forehead before quickly walking to the messy living room. Under Chihaya Fukuyama's instructions, Asahi Sakura Kanji was in the room trying to dispel little Chiketsu's curiosity about the strange sound downstairs. Chihaya Fukuyama himself, as the person who was the least injured, had already taken Qin Xingyan down from the wall. It had to be said that Qin Xingyan was the peak of the young cultivators in this era. His cultivation had played a considerable role. Although he had not reached the level of a leakless body, his injuries were healing at an extremely fast speed. She had also woken up not long ago. In addition, her flying sword, 100 Herbs, was also healing power to the other 2 people in the room. The dog girl was still unconscious because of the strength of the kick. Senior. What exactly happened just now? Seeing Su Shenqing come out, Qin Xingyan, who had suffered domestic violence, first trembled. When old Su Shenqing came back, she had already fainted, so she did not know that the person who had injured her was another Su Shenqing. However, seeing that Su Shenqing did not seem to have Shirlaji, she mustered up the courage to ask. If I'm not wrong, Emily must have had a nightmare. Su Shenqing scratched his head and answered with an awkward expression. No, isn't that strange too? Why would Miss Emily dream of such a senior in her nightmares? Senior, were you that violent in the past? How could that be? Su Shenqing said with a hollow laugh. That's what I meant. Qin Xingyan showed a relieved expression. If the degree of violence was multiplied by 3 and squared, it would be the degree of violence that Emily saw in the past. Isn't that even worse? While the two were still talking, the ground suddenly trembled slightly. Su Xinxing thought that the Balrog he had stuffed under Sakura apartment wanted to escape because the protection of the Holy Land had disappeared. So he gently stomped his foot, but the tremor did not disappear. Only then did he feel that something was wrong and looked out the window. Then, he saw something that looked like Godzilla on the city's horizon in the distance. I must still be in a dream, right? Qin Xingyan, who also felt that something was wrong, looked in that direction and naturally saw the huge monster that usually only appeared in Ultraman. You're not the one in the dream. Su Xinxing smacked his lips. He recognized that monster. It was a relatively common monster in the Great Devil Realm. Its status was probably similar to the little white rabbits on Earth. It was a giant monster that was purely bred to eat meat, a Karasin dragon. Although in the Great Devil Realm, this kind of monster that was useless except for its size was basically no threat other than being a good meal. It could not even defeat the 99-headed demonic dragon that was at the bottom of the food chain in the Great Devil Realm. But if it was placed on Earth, it would be a bit troublesome. For the people on Earth, this thing might be even more difficult to deal with than Godzilla. Unless they had a weapon on the level of the Centaurus space battleship's main cannon, there was almost no way to kill it in one shot. Su Xinxing opened the window, touched his pocket, took out a coin from it, and flicked it gently. Suddenly, an orange-yellow beam of light flew out from his fingertips, and finally, with an unreasonable phenomenon that broke through the constants of physics, it blasted the monster's head and stopped its destructive behavior. Su Xinxing heaved a sigh of relief. However, he understood that the longer this situation was delayed, the more troublesome it would be. The really troublesome guys in the Great Devil Realm had not appeared yet. Before he could relax for long, a rough crack appeared in the sky as if a piece of it had been torn off. A huge eyeball appeared in the crack. The gaze revealed by the eyeball was full of malice and madness, causing almost everyone who looked at it to fall into hysterical madness. That was the eye of the King of Arrogance, a private in the Great Devil Realm. A considerable number of them were sent to carry out colonial wars. In other words, they were sent to part of the Lattice world as the Demon King's race. If the Kraken Dragon could still fight a few rounds with the other party just now, then the enemy this time was purely to the extent of being crushed. Many of the 9,000 Lattice worlds' technological levels were higher than Earth's and belonged to the near future, but in front of this monster, there was no way to fight back. Su Xinxing immediately tore off the aluminum alloy window edge, twisted it into a sharp and thin spiral, and then threw it at the eye. Almost in the next moment, the terrifying giant eye exploded directly. Countless stinky blood poured like heavy rain on the buildings in the city center, and suddenly, the city of Jiangjin was dyed red. We can't continue like this, Su Xinxing said in a deep voice. Although the demonic creatures were no match for him, once the number of demonic creatures increased, even if he could eliminate all of them in the end, the entire Earth would be destroyed beyond recognition. Senior, what should we do now? Qin Xingyan asked worriedly. The current situation was completely beyond the scope of her ability and knowledge. It's useless to eliminate these almost infinite monsters. The only way is to block them from the source. The source. The girl blinked. Su Xinxing was silent for a moment before he continued, yes, let's enter Mo Li's dream. There's no other way. Chapter 511. Enter a dream. Senior, do you have such an ability? Qin Xingyan's face was full of surprise. She seemed to find it inconceivable that Su Xinxing could use other powers other than physical and protective powers. Nonsense, of course I don't. Su Xinxing had a matter-of-fact look on his face. Although he had entered the Earth Loli's dream before and even changed reality because of it, that was with Mo Li's ability. Unfortunately, Su Xinxing himself couldn't do this. But don't cultivators like you have spells like dream teleportation? Can't you use that to enter? How about that? Although dream teleportation spells aren't difficult, aren't all my spells ineffective against Senior and Mo Li? Qin Xingyan sighed and reminded him. Then she looked out the window again and saw that the shadow of a huge creature was gradually becoming clearer not far away. And even if it's effective, will Jiang Jin really be alright while we're away? Putting everything else aside, wouldn't Jiang Jin be completely destroyed if one or two more Godzilla-like creatures like the one just now appeared? You don't have to worry about that. Su Xinxing took out an object that looked like a glass bead from his pocket. When the Croconsaurus appeared just now, I had the guy inside use the Sword of Truth to remove the current Earth from the flow of time of this world. That is to say, the current Earth is now independent of all timelines. As long as we take care of things and put the Earth back on the original flow of time, there won't be a problem. To put it simply, it was more or less the feeling of, eat my sword of truth and let's just pretend that nothing happened. Senior, why do I feel that what you're talking about is completely beyond the level of cultivators like us? Well, that's true. After all, that glass bead was originally a broken world called Loren Visa. For cultivators who were currently limited to the solar system, it was indeed a little too far away. And although Loren Visa was a broken world that was in imminent danger and could collapse at any time in the past, their level of magic and technology was quite high. Moreover, their civilization was not limited to the level of a planet or a galaxy, but a world-class civilization in the true sense. So much so that they even launched a rebellion against the Mid-Serta world that belonged to the Space Administration, although in the end, it was settled by Su Xinxing alone. Loren Visa, which had been turned into a lattice world, was not destroyed, just like the lattice worlds that were displayed in the cabinet by the Demon King. Not only that, but in a sense, after becoming a lattice world, the defects of the Loren Visa world itself had been suppressed and slowed down to a certain extent. The sense of crisis that seemed to be hanging over their heads like the sword of Damocles had also been temporarily lifted. According to Su Xinxing's occasional observation of this world, the ruler of the Loren Visa world was now a little girl named Tarbal. She seemed to be the sister of Emperor Dajida, who was killed by Su Xinxing in the rebellion. After that, Su Xinxing also tried to get in touch with the other party and found that although the other party had a certain degree of hatred for him, after all, old Su Xinxing slapped her brother to death as a world hero who led the entire Loren Visa to stand up and fight against fate. The girl expressed her gratitude to Su Xinxing for resolving the crisis of Loren Visa to a certain extent and promised not to bring her hatred for old Su into official business, especially after old Su made it clear that he had a way to repair the conceptual defects of Loren Visa and completely solve all the hidden dangers once and for all. And Su Xinxing was also very interested in the decisive battle weapon that Loren Visa created with the power of the entire world. Although that kind of thing was basically useless to Su Xinxing, several decisive battle weapons almost involved concept-level attacks, which was very rare. From old Su's point of view, Loren Visa's magical technology was terrifyingly high. If the great demonic realm had encountered Loren Visa when they were colonizing the surrounding worlds, they might have been able to fight back and forth in the early stages. After all, the Demon King used for colonization, that is, the race of the so-called arrogant king, would most likely not be able to beat this kind of concept weapon. Unless they could send an existence like Alina, the Demon King from the retired hero chapter, it would be difficult to successfully colonize Loren Visa. Then, after Su Xinxing confirmed that Mo Li began to have nightmares and the creatures of the great demonic realm were born as a result, he secretly contacted Tarbal of Loren Visa. As the owner of the lattice world, Su Xinxing did not even need to enter it physically. He could create an avatar to negotiate with the other party through the creator's authority. Finally, after agreeing to some relatively simple conditions, the other party agreed to use the sword of reason to temporarily pull the earth out of the flow of time. As for the fact that your spell has no effect on Emily and me, it's not that there's no way to solve it. Because it was difficult to explain the principle of the sword of reason to Qin Xingyan. In fact, even Su Xinqing did not know the principle of this thing. He simply changed the topic. Really? Qin Xingyan was taken aback, and then he was speechless. All of Mo Li's magic was originally stored in my body, but now because the seal has been unlocked to the third stage, about 30% of it has flowed into Mo Li's body. This is the main reason why her nightmares have such a great impact on reality. Su Xinqing nodded and said something that didn't seem to have anything to do with what he was saying. But Qin Xingyan did not interrupt him, but continued to listen quietly to his story. Ordinary spells can't affect Mo Li and me, but in fact, there is an exception. When Su Xinqing said this, Qin Xingyan showed a look of understanding. Senior, you mean that Mo Li's spell can affect you, right? But now Mo Li, she... Well, although that's the case, do you think Mo Li's spell is different from ordinary spells? Su Xinqing asked rhetorically. I'm not sure what type of spell Miss Mo Li uses. Qin Xingyan looked troubled, but it should be a very advanced type, right? Wrong. Indeed, Mo Li's spell, or magic, can be said to be terrifying, but in fact, the spell structure she uses is very simple, the only difference is magic. Su Xinqing grinned and revealed the mystery. For example, everyone knows that the Z-line between 2 points is the shortest, but if you can use a simple and crude method to teleport, you don't need to look for a straight line at all. Mo Li is the same, even if it's just a little bit of magic. The simplest spell can surpass the carefully constructed spells of others, so naturally she doesn't need to spend any effort to construct it. Oh, I'm a bit off topic, but there's only one thing I want to say. What can affect Mo Li and me is not Mo Li's spell, but Mo Li's magic. Su Xinqing's expression became slightly more serious, so whether it's entering or leaving a dream, I'll provide you with a certain amount of Mo Li's magic. Use that and let us enter her dream world. Chapter 5:12. She only regained 30% of her magic power, and she had this kind of nightmare. Who is Miss Mo Li? Qin Xingyan asked curiously. Simply put, Su Xinqing organized his words before answering, she's the crystallization of the world. Seeing that Su Xinqing didn't seem to want to continue explaining, Qin Xingyan just nodded slightly, and then showed a gentle smile. Is that so? I understand. Then what should I do next? Senior, please tell me. First of all, the transfer of magic power. To be honest, passing Mo Li's magic power to you is risky. Even if I can prevent you from dying through the blessing of dying breath, I'm afraid you'll suffer more terrible pain than death. Su Xinqing warned with a rare serious face. But senior, this is the only way right now, right? Qin Xingyan replied with a wry smile. Well, if you really don't want to, I can try to use a more physical method to invade Mo Li's dream, but the success rate of that method isn't high, right? The girl hit the nail on the head. According to my understanding of senior, if it's a problem that you can solve by relying on senior, you'd usually rather work harder than involve us in those things. It's as if you're subconsciously avoiding having a deeper relationship with us. In other words, this time senior, after you understood the reason, you subconsciously wanted to use my ability. Most likely, it's because it's difficult to rely solely on the physical method you mentioned, right? Su Xinqing's expression was a little awkward. That was indeed the case. Although it was indeed possible to enter Jasmine's dreamscape through entering a dream, physics, the probability of that happening could be said to be minuscule. Even Su Xinqing would need a considerable amount of time to practice in order to accurately enter the dreamscape, just like how he had spent a full 10 years in another world to learn how to cut open the correct flow of time and send his disciple back to this time. Now that the earth had been removed from the flow of time because of the Sword of Truth, no matter how long one practiced here, it would not affect the time in the outside world. However, Emoli himself had transcended the concept of time, and because of Su Xinqing's existence, Sakura apartment itself existed independently of the outside world. This was why the people in Sakura apartment could still move normally when the time in the outside world had stopped. I'm very happy. I'm so happy that Senior can ask me for help at this time without hesitation that I'm so happy that I'm about to cry. Qin Xingyan put his hands on his chest and said with a soft expression, I've been studying and practicing hard, but no matter how hard I try, I can't keep up with Senior's pace. When I realized how big the gap between us was, for the first time in my life, I had this kind of worry. If one day, Senior goes to a place that I can't reach, if one day, Senior doesn't need me to follow behind him, what should I do? So even if it's extremely painful, it doesn't matter. If I can help you, please take my body, my soul, and everything I have. I always feel so heavy. Su Xinqing scratched the back of his head and complained. Yeah. Is that so? Qin Xingyan also giggled, but there was still some sadness in his eyes. Just when she was about to say something to gloss over her confession and make the atmosphere a little more relaxed, Su Xinqing took a step forward, held her in his arms, and then kissed her on the lips. Ah, intimately licking, I wanted to. Canine girl, who had just woken up, saw the two people kissing and suddenly became excited. She shouted and wanted to jump on them. But before she could do anything, she was pressed to the ground by Chihaya Fukuyama, who was trying to reduce her presence, and said, Idiot, look at the atmosphere. Since she had already spoken, it meant that Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't continue to be an ostrich. In fact, she didn't want to be an ostrich in the beginning. It was purely because the sudden appearance of Croconsaurus and the King of Arrogance outside the window was too shocking, so she was so scared that she lost the best opportunity to speak. If you want to flirt, can you go to the room? If you do it here. I don't think it's a good idea. She tried to cover the struggling dog girl's eyes as she spoke to Su Xinqing, who was still kissing each other. It was only then that Su Xinqing let go of his hand and distanced himself from Qin Xingyan, who had become dizzy. Because they kissed for a long time, the kiss that was originally just lips touching turned into a deep French kiss. When Su Xinqing raised his face and his lips finally parted from Qin Xingyan, there were even sparkling droplets of saliva at the corners of their mouths. Then Su Xinqing said with a dignified expression, No, I'm not flirting. Chihaya Fukuyama responded with an expression that said, What is this scumbag saying? Is he trying to shirk responsibility after kissing me? I know you don't believe me, but because I don't know how to use magic, I can only transfer my magic through a more traditional method, such as mucosal contact. Is Mo Li's magic AIDS? Chihaya Fukuyama complained. AIDS is body fluid exchange, isn't it? Su Xinqing was not embarrassed at all. Because he was too open and aboveboard, it deepened Chihaya Fukuyama's impression of him as a scumbag. In addition, although she was born in Fusang, where the atmosphere was more open, Qianzhao seemed to be very unfamiliar with the topic of sex. After saying a few words to Su Xinqing, she was already blushing like something was wrong. Compared to this, Xingyan, how does your body feel? Su Xinqing turned his attention back to Qin Xingyan. Ah. Oh, my lips are numb, they feel warm and comfortable. Qin Xingyan was called by Su Xinqing and immediately came back to her senses. However, from her answer, it was obvious that she was still confused. I don't know why, but I feel like Senpai is very familiar with it. Suddenly, Su Xinqing felt that the scumbag from Chihaya Fukuyama was staring at him with a piercing gaze. Ahem, I'm asking how does it feel to transfer my magic into your body? Su Xinxing coughed and asked in a serious tone. Ugh. Qin Xingyan seemed to have finally realized what she had said. Her face turned even redder than Chihaya Fukuyama's, and her voice became as soft as a mosquito's. If it wasn't for Su Xinxing's good hearing, he probably wouldn't have heard what she said. It doesn't feel like anything special. However, before Qin Xingyan could finish her sentence, she felt as if she had been hit on the head by an invisible sledgehammer. She stumbled for no reason. Then, the skin on her back seemed to have cracked open due to the excessive pressure in her body, and a large amount of blood spurted out like bright red wings. Chapter 5:13. Xingyan. Even Su Xinxing was shocked. He didn't expect the side effects of the magical energy entering the girl's body to be so severe. I'm fine. When the girl fell forward, she subconsciously wanted to grab onto Su Xinxing's hand to maintain her balance. But just as she was about to touch Su Xinxing, she was afraid that her cracked and bloodied hand would dirty Su Xinxing's clothes. So, she pulled her hand back and staggered a few times before she managed to stabilize herself. How does this look like nothing's wrong? Su Xinxing ignored the girl's stubbornness and supported her. Senpai, now is not the time to be concerned about me. Aren't you going to save Miss Mo Lee? But, then please take me to Miss Mo Lee's room. The girl leaned into Su Xinxing's arms and gently but firmly interrupted Su Xinxing's hesitation. She said in a weak but firm voice, please believe me, I will definitely help. Su Xinxing was stunned for a moment before his expression softened. He carried the girl in his arms and walked towards the room. Hey, wait a minute. Chihaya Fukuyama shouted from behind, she's about to die. Is it really okay for you to let her help you? It's okay. You bastard, are you actually such a cold-blooded bastard? Chihaya Fukuyama was stunned by Su Xinxing's indifferent voice and spoke with an expression of disbelief. But Su Xinxing's following words directly dispelled Chihaya Fukuyama's doubts. If Xingyan dies because of this, I will bring her back even if it means tearing the underworld apart. Su Xinxing paused for a moment before replying, a mere world has no right to steal someone from me. After speaking, he walked into Mo Lee's room. Although I don't know what's going on, I still want to go in. The dog girl who had no idea what was going on was about to rush into the room excitedly, but was pulled back by Chihaya Fukuyama. Wait a minute. The situation is very dangerous right now, I need your strength. Really? Really? That's right, so guard the door. Ahem, I'll leave the living room to you. Understood. After being convinced by Chihaya Fukuyama, the dog girl was filled with a sense of duty as she dragged Big White around the living room. After making sure that the girl wouldn't run around and cause trouble, Chihaya Fukuyama's room followed Su's footsteps. Inside the room, Su Xinxing's room, and Qin Xingyan was kneeling by the bed. He was drawing a huge formation spell, a spell formations, with his blood, SSS, He's S. But from the way the girl looked like she was about to faint at any moment, it seemed like she wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. This made Chihaya Fukuyama look at Su Xinxing with some uneasiness, but old Su's face was still expressionless. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. It's done. At this moment, Qin Xingyan's powerless voice sounded. He had finally finished drawing the last stroke of the spell formation and left his bloody handprint in the center of the formation. Senpai, please stand at the head of the bed, I'll send you into your dream. Sorry to trouble you. Su Xinxing also opened his cloud scale and accepted the girl's magical effect. A white light flashed, and Su Xinxing disappeared from where he stood. After successfully sending Su Xinxing into his dream, Qin Xingyan spat out a mouthful of black stuff mixed with blood. It was unknown whether it was a blood clot or a piece of his internal organs. His eyes became blurry. Hey, are you really okay? Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't help but ask. I'm fine. Qin Xingyan's forehead was sweating, and the temperature of his skin rose. Miss Chihaya, I have a request. What is it? Chihaya Fukuyama was a little curious. This was the first time Qin Xingyan had said something like this to her. Although Su Xinxing probably didn't know, Qin Xingyan had always been a bit of a loner in Sakura's apartment. Although she almost never refused anyone's request for help, she always solved her own problems and would not ask for help unless it was absolutely necessary. Therefore, when Chihaya Fukuyama suddenly heard that Qin Xingyan had something to ask her for help, it was a bit of a novelty. Senpai, it must be very troublesome to do things alone in that kind of place. If it's okay, can I ask for your help? Are you still clear-headed? If you think it's dangerous, that's not what I meant. Chihaya Fukuyama rudely interrupted Qin Xingyan. I know it's dangerous, but do you know your current situation? Your face is so pale right now. Compared to a dead person, it's just that you have one more breath. Under such circumstances, if you send me into the dream world again, can you really survive? Chihaya Fukuyama knew that she was angry, but she didn't know what she was angry about. Chihaya Fukuyama felt that she could understand Qin Xingyan's feelings of wanting to repay Su Xinxing. However, this method of repayment was like humiliating oneself, which made Chihaya Fukuyama very uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I was too abrupt. Qin Xingyan supported himself against the wall and tried to stand up. Then, he activated the formation on the wall again. Since you don't want to, I'll go by myself. You're such a big idiot. Chihaya Fukuyama shouted angrily. Even if you go with him, how can you help him? I don't know. Qin Xingyan answered matter-of-factly, but I'll do my best to help. Looking at the smile on Qin Xingyan's face, Chihaya Fukuyama understood at this moment, for an individual like Qin Xingyan, the important thing was not whether he could help Su Xinxing, but whether he could do his best to help him. This was a pure feeling of giving everything to that guy who was neither handsome nor humorous as the foundation of her existence. I understand, I'll go and help. After understanding this, Chihaya Fukuyama sighed heavily. So you just rest here. Maybe we'll need you to pull us out when the time comes. Thank you, please. When the white light that filled the room disappeared for the second time, Qin Xingyan looked down at his palm that was full of cracks and bleeding. He said to himself helplessly, sure enough, this is all I can do to help Senior. I'm really not satisfied. Inside the Bailu Temple. Like most places on Earth, because of the Sword of Truth, time here was in a state of stagnation. Because everyone was in a standstill, no one noticed that the wooden tablet with the words Qin Xingyan on it was gradually decaying. Chapter 5:14. Phew. I really didn't expect to come back to this place in my life. Standing on the ginger-yellow ground, Su Xinxing exhaled and whispered. The sky was covered by another celestial body. Looking from the ground, he could only see a dark mass. This land was so barren that Su Xinxing couldn't even see a blade of grass. There were only ginger-yellow stones and yellow stones. Although there was no sand or dust, the smell in the air made people feel as if the whole ground was covered in a ginger-yellow fog. Looking from afar, on the other side of the horizon, he could vaguely see a similarly yellow canyon. Anyway, let's get out of here first. Just as Su Xinxing made up his mind, a figure landed beside him with a loud thud, accompanied by a scream. Scared me to death. After a while, Chihaya Fukuyama sat up and sighed with tears in her eyes. That guy didn't tell me he would appear in the air. Why are you here? Su Xinxing asked in surprise. He was really surprised. In the entire Sakura apartment, except for little Chiketsu and Yujing, in Su Xinxing's opinion, Chihaya Fukuyama was the last person who would follow him here. He wouldn't be surprised if Dog Girl and Dehei appeared here. After all, in a sense, Su Xinqing and this guy basically had no ties. Even Asahi Sakura Kanji and Su Xinqing's relationship was closer than Chihaya Fukuyama's. Of course it's to keep an eye on you, scumbag, so you don't go out and fool around. Chihaya Fukuyama replied confidently. Although she also had the option of telling Su Xinqing what Qin Xingyan looked like when she came in the end, Chihaya Fukuyama decided to hide it for the time being. In addition, she didn't want to directly admit that she was here to help, so she simply found a reason that made Su Xinqing a little dumbfounded. Forget it, Su Xinqing naturally saw that she didn't mean what she said, but he didn't intend to ask. Compared to Chihaya Fukuyama's thoughts, it was more important for him to solve this dream as soon as possible and wake up Emily. As long as you don't get in my way, it's fine. Although Chihaya Fukuyama wanted to refute Su Xinqing's presumptuous view of others as a burden, the fact was that even if she used all her strength, she might not even be able to hurt a hair on this guy's head. If it were other girls, they might use the fact that they were women to make a scene and pester Su Xinqing endlessly, but Chihaya Fukuyama not only knew her place, but also had self-respect, so of course, she wouldn't do such a thing. So what should we do next? Do we find that little girl Emily in this Gobi Desert? She asked straightforwardly. The Gobi Desert, Su Xinqing repeated it ambiguously, then asked with a half-smile, what do you think the process of solving a nightmare is like? Entering a nightmare, then step by step like playing an RPG, find and trigger the plot, and finally solve it? Isn't that the case? Chihaya Fukuyama asked angrily. Well, if it's a normal situation, maybe it's like that. But there's a problem, this is the great devil world, so you'd better be mentally prepared. Su Xinqing opened his mouth and looked back at the sky, because from the beginning, it's the climax. Then, his voice turned cold. I'm right, aren't I? I've seen enough, big guy. Big guy. Wait, I said. Chihaya Fukuyama didn't react for a while. But immediately, the huge dehei-colored celestial body in the sky began to gradually move away from the ground. When it moved away to a certain distance, the girl took a deep breath and saw the scales of the other side clearly. It was an incomparably huge eye, and the black color that almost covered the entire sky before was just the pupil of the eye. So you haven't noticed it until now. What are we on top of now? In the face of this situation, Su Xinqing was as calm as ever. Only then did the girl realize that there was something wrong with the gobi under her feet. Although the ground was as hard as a rock, it was completely different from a rock. The white particles also exuded a strange sweet smell, and the whole earth seemed to exude a wonderful wheat fragrance. All of this was just like, yes, the endless plain we are on is just the surface of a piece of whole wheat bread. The canyon in front of us that is more than 50 meters deep is just an opening for the bread to be heated more evenly. Only then did Su Xinqing reveal the mystery. Can you tell me that you're just joking? The girl's face was ugly. At this time, the owner of the eye was quite far away from them, or rather, from the bread. The somewhat human-like face finally appeared in the girl's eyes, but because it was too far away, at first glance, it gave people the feeling of looking at the moon on Earth. Unfortunately, it's not possible. Su Xinqing smiled and cut off the girl's last hope. The next moment, a new celestial body appeared above the Earth. It was like a huge irregular planet, a huge celestial body that shrouded the entire bread land. It was a hand. Chihaya Fukuyama had never experienced such a deep sense of despair. It was like being on Earth, but discovering that Mars was about to turn around. No matter where you ran to, you would only end up in GG. Although the giant's hand had not fallen, it had almost covered the entire sky. No matter how you ran, it was useless. It was simply unavoidable. What's wrong? Although I said it was the climax from the beginning, I didn't say it was the end. Su Xinqing smiled slightly, and Roland Duel instantly appeared in his hand. Chihaya Fukuyama only saw the blade of the long sword in his hand flashing. The next moment, the huge celestial body in the sky was cut in half from the middle. Dark red viscous liquid gushed out from the cross-section of the celestial body, and the whole sky seemed to be dyed red. It poured down like a torrential rain, but with the second flash of Su Shinqing's blade, it was cut in half. At this time, Su Shinqing's empty left hand grabbed the right hand of the girl who was dumbfounded by the unscientific scene. "Don't be in a daze, let's go." Then, the cloud scale on Su Shinqing's body passed along his hand and covered Chihaya Fukuyama's whole body. With Su Shinqing's powerful leap, the scenery around the two of them turned into countless spots of light, which they left behind. If Yunlin had not cast a few wards on Su Shinqing, the force produced in that instant would have been enough to crush the girl, who was a deity, into dust. When the force was exhausted, the girl found that they seemed to have jumped to a place higher than the giant. It was only then that the scream of the giant whose hand was cut off reached their ears. "This guy is the great demon race, the great demon realm, the absolute top of the food chain in this world. Their bodies are very huge, and the guy we just saw was half the size of Earth. I've even encountered a planet level 1. This world is too unscientific, isn't it?" Chihaya Fukuyama could not help but feel a little powerless. Originally, as a god, after possessing power far beyond that of ordinary people, the girl still felt a little proud of her power even though she would not deliberately show it. But after encountering such ferocious monsters, her power was completely useless. The king of the great demon race is the final demon king in the depths of this world. He collects other worlds, seizes the source power of those worlds, and uses it to expand the great demon realm. Unlike many other worlds, although the great demon realm can surpass many other worlds in terms of size, in fact, the great demon realm does not have the concept of a universe. Its existence is just like the myth of the heavens being round and the earth being round. It is completely composed of this infinite land and sky. Su Shinqing casually took a step in the air, and he could fly a considerable distance in the air with the girl. Because the size of the objects and the surroundings that could be used as reference was not normal, Chiyo Yamanaka could not estimate how far Su Shinqing could fly with this step. Well, if this could be counted as flying, how far they flew. But from the fact that every time they flew, it seemed to break the sound barrier, and even the air around clouds scaled directly turned into plasma due to the effect of high-speed movement, it would probably be quite an astonishing number if expressed in meters. That guy, the final demon king. He claimed that the reason he collected other worlds was to better protect them from destruction, but in reality, it was only to plunder the origins of other worlds and use them to continuously strengthen himself. His colonization of over 9,000 worlds succeeded, but several times that number of worlds were destroyed as a result, and all of this was due to his own greed. "You've met the Demon King." Chihaya Fukuyama tried to divert his attention from the giants chasing after them as he asked Su Shinqing. To be precise, Su Shinqing paused, then continued, "I killed him." Many monsters blocked the two of them, from the evolved form of the kraken dragon that appeared on Earth before, to the supergiant serpent that could circle the planet, to the giant wolf that seemed to be able to swallow the entire solar system in one bite, and so on. If any of these monsters were placed on Earth without the existence of Su Shinqing and Immerse, it would immediately lead to the destruction of Earth and even the solar system. These monsters obviously wanted to stop Su Shinqing and the others, but the power that could shake the world in a certain world was useless. None of the monsters could withstand the flash of Su Shinqing's sword. Chihaya Fukuyama even thought that if Su Shinqing was not too lazy to waste time, it would not be difficult for him to turn back and kill the giants chasing after them. And that was the truth. After leaving the house that seemed to be comparable to the size of a galaxy, the two of them finally arrived outside. The great demonic realm, which had absorbed the origins of more than 9,000 worlds, was an extremely distorted world. Outside, one could see inconceivably gigantic trees as large as the world tree that only appeared in fantasy. One could also see horses the size of mice, roaring dragons flying across the sky, and ant-men building exquisite fortresses that resembled models. But there was one building that could be seen at a glance no matter where in this world, the naturally impossible to be born mountain in the center of the world, as magnificent as a sky pillar. Although it could not be seen from the ground, there was actually a castle at the top of the mountain, and that was where the final demon king was located. At this time, on the sky pillar, there was a thin green vine wrapped around it. Because the distance was not particularly close, even Su Xinxing could only see a trace of invisible green after looking carefully. Sure enough, what's wrong? The girl who had been scared numb by this crazy world asked subconsciously. The timeline of this nightmare is when I first came to this world. Not knowing if it was because of nostalgia for the past or some other reason, Su Xinxing actually answered Chihaya Fukuyama's question. The vine on the sky pillar was planted by me. At that time, there was a restriction on the mountain, and there was no way to climb directly, so it took me a long time to get a pea that could grow quickly and without limit, and then I entered the castle at the top of the mountain. At this time, Chihaya Fukuyama came back to her senses. Are we going there? No, before that, I still have a place to go. Speaking of which, I always feel that my sense of distance is a bit strange. I always feel that the mountain is very far away, but it feels different from the distance that I see on Earth. Chihaya Fukuyama rubbed her eyes. Maybe she felt that there was something wrong with her eyes, but even so, the strange feeling of looking at the sky pillar still lingered in her heart, lingering. Oh, that's normal. We are not far from the mountain, but we are not close either. According to the calculation of the world where Earth is, it should be about 120,000 light-years. What? Chihaya Fukuyama was dumbfounded. 120,000 light-years. Su Xinxing calmly repeated. In that case, didn't the scene on the other side of the mountain happen 120,000 years ago? Chihaya Fukuyama was a little crazy. No, you calculated it according to the speed of light in the world where Earth is. The light in this world is also distorted, and it can almost ignore time and space to spread, so what we see is real time. What the hell kind of world is this? The Great Devil Realm is such a place, you'll get used to it. By the way, our movement speed is also faster than the speed of light, more specifically, it should be faster than 1,000, 2,000. Su Xinxing shrugged first to indicate that it was not a big deal, then he started counting with his fingers. According to the theory of relativity, if you exceed the speed of light, you can already travel through time. Chihaya Fukuyama continued to complain. You should ask the physicist about this kind of thing. What's the use of telling me, anyway? We didn't go back to the past, right? Su Xinxing continued to spread his hands to express helplessness. What he could see was only the phenomenon. As for why this phenomenon existed, old Su said that he was not a scientist, so why should he care so much? I give up. So where are you going? Chihaya Fukuyama seemed to finally understand that this world was not very reasonable. Some of the common sense on Earth did not seem to be applicable here. Well, a place I once passed by. Su Xinxing said this and paused slightly. His originally somewhat frivolous expression became slightly more serious. About this nightmare, I have a conjecture that I want to try to verify. Chapter 5:15. So, we haven't arrived yet, Chihaya Fukuyama asked, wanting to cry but having no tears. Now, she was being carried on Su Xinxing's shoulder like a sack, experiencing the legendary high-speed train for ordinary people. Although she had expressed her doubts to Su Xinxing before, the wording was exquisite, the words were tactful, and there were thousands of words. If she had to write it down, it would be too much. In summary, it would probably be, "Are you king kidding me?" It was no wonder she had such doubts. In this world, because the nature of light had been tampered with, it could spread almost without any delay, so a person's sense of distance would also produce a strange error. For example, the towering stone mountain did not seem far away, but in fact, it was 120,000 light-years away. In addition, although Su Shenxing did not mention it, in theory, even if it was a star larger than the sun, the light emitted from such a distant place could only be seen as a speck of light not much bigger than a speck of dust. Even in this world, the theory of far small and near large was still applicable. It was conceivable that even if it was 120,000 light-years away, it still looked like a pillar, how huge its body was. If it was in the universe where Earth was located, such a huge object could not exist at all. Its mass alone was far beyond the level of a black hole, but in this great devil realm where common sense was distorted, it really existed in the world. And Chihaya Fukuyama, because of Su Shenxing's method of moving in the air and the distance produced by the surrounding scenery, would have the illusion of moving very slowly. In addition, there was no theoretical reference that could be 100% confirmed, so it was normal for her to be fooled by Su Shenxing and feel that this world was actually not so strange. After understanding Chihaya Fukuyama's suspicion, Su Shenxing did not take it to heart. He just made a bet with the other party. In fact, he also felt that this kind of running was too slow, even if each step could travel several light-years. It was not that Su Shenxing could not run faster, but he had certain concerns. After all, even if the cloud scale formed a world of its own to ensure that the girl would not be directly crushed to death by the acceleration caused by his supraluminal movement, the cloud scale's carrying capacity was limited. If he went faster than that, the cloud scale might be torn apart. At that time, Su Shenxing would be fine, but the girl would be reduced to ashes. Therefore, he decided to make a bet with the girl. The bet was the position. Well, posture. As long as the body contact area could increase, Su Shenxing could directly cast protection on the girl, and it would be fine to run a little faster. Because of this, he simply let the girl go and let her try to run on her own. Chihaya Fukuyama naturally did the same. However, to her disbelief, although she ran as fast as she could, and at the same time, she was getting farther and farther away from Su Shenxing, but everything around her did not seem to be getting closer at all. After running for more than an hour, Chihaya Fukuyama had no way to know the exact time because she did not wear a watch. She could no longer see Su Shenxing, but the scene around her did not change at all. Even the nearest thing, which looked like a small mound, did not get closer at all. So the girl simply gritted her teeth and used the escape technique she learned from the Earth lowly, moving forward in units of 100 miles. Chihaya Fukuyama did not know how much magical power, or divine power, a god had, but when she was a little numb, and the power in her body was almost exhausted, the scene around her was still the same. It was not until this time that she began to believe Su Shenxing's words. Because of the blurred sense of distance, the surrounding things seemed to be very close to them, but in fact, the distance was astronomical. It was a distance that even a god on an ordinary planet like her would find difficult to cross. When the Earth lowly taught her, she once said that as long as she mastered the escape technique of the immortals, she could go to most places in the Celestial Empire in a flash. After that, she also curiously tried the limit of the escape technique. At that time, she came to the conclusion that it was not a problem to go around the Earth once, but it was a little difficult to go around the Earth twice. Here was a little comparison. The circumference of the Earth's equator was about 40,000 kilometers, which meant that Chihaya Fukuyama's limit was between 40,000 and 80,000 kilometers. However, the speed of light was less than 7.5 times around the Earth per second. It took about 8 minutes for the sunlight to travel from the sun to the Earth, and this was considered a short distance among the celestial bodies in the universe. Even the moon, the closest celestial body to the Earth, took nearly 1.3 seconds to travel the distance between the two at the speed of light. In other words, Chihaya Fukuyama's escape technique could not even reach the moon, and Su Xinqing's starting point was calculated in light years. Then the girl was a little flustered. Although the distance of tens of thousands of kilometers was nothing in this world, it was extremely far for humans. Even if the starting point was a little bit off, Su Xinqing might pass by her. In that case, she would be left alone in this place where she could not escape no matter how hard she tried. It was really too scary. What are you looking around for? At this time, the girl was startled by the sudden voice, and then she found that Su Xinqing had appeared beside her without her knowing. At this moment, Chihaya Fukuyama felt that Su Xinqing's face was unusually handsome. However, this feeling of excitement was broken by Su Xinqing in the next moment. He picked his nose, frowned and said, "What, are you going to go back on your word?" At this moment, Chihaya Fukuyama felt that she might have to say goodbye to her maiden heart for the rest of her life. "Yeah, we're almost there." Su Xinqing's words made Chihaya Fukuyama on his shoulder come back to her senses. Suddenly, the feeling that was 1,000 times worse than motion sickness swept through the girl's brain, and she wished that she could just faint. Where are you going?" In order to make herself feel better, Chihaya Fukuyama tried to divert her attention and talk to Su Xinqing, although she felt that if this continued, she might vomit all over Su Xinqing. "Actually, I was very curious from the beginning, because of Yunlin's help." Even though they were moving at high speed, Su Xinqing's words still reached the girl's ears, because the time of Mo Li's nightmare is wrong. "What time does a nightmare have?" Chihaya Fukuyama complained. "Even so, the problem is that at this time," Su Xinqing paused and frowned, "Mo Li hasn't been born yet." Chapter 5:16. Wait. What do you mean Miss Mo Li hasn't been born yet? Chihaya Fukuyama asked in surprise. Is this dream world from more than 10 years ago? No, according to Earth's concept of time, it should be 3 years ago. Su Xinqing shook his head and said. Then isn't Miss Mo Li only 3 years old? Chihaya Fukuyama was stunned. If she wasn't being carried on Su Xinqing's shoulder and couldn't turn around, she would have already looked at him with disdain. Yes, in theory, that's true, but you can't just say one side of the story. Su Xinqing casually replied, also, it's not good to casually call someone a beast. Did I say that out loud? You really did say that in your heart. I guessed. Although he was madly complaining in his heart, Su Xinqing's expression didn't change much. Oh right, I have good news for you. What? Chihaya Fukuyama's voice sounded a bit scared. We're almost at our destination. Really? The girl suddenly felt a sense of joy as if she had just survived a disaster. Really? And in order to let you end your pain faster, Su Xinqing grinned, I'll speed up a bit. 10 minutes later, they finally arrived at the destination that Su Xinqing spoke of. It was different from the terrifying area that seemed to be filled with many things, but was actually distorted by the sense of distance. This was a stone mushroom forest. There were huge stone pillars that were several meters thick everywhere, and at the top of the pillars was a stone cap that looked like a parasol. If you kept a distance, it would look like a giant enoki mushroom, just that the mushroom cap was relatively large. Because of the dense growth of the stone mushrooms, the sense of distance here was relatively normal. Ugh! You must have done it on purpose. Chihaya Fukuyama half knelt on the ground, her face pale and her expression sad. She felt a surge of acid in her stomach, but she didn't know if it was because this was just a dream or because she didn't have time to eat today, but she couldn't vomit. She could only keep retching. No, how could that be? Su Shenxing, on the other hand, was flushed red and his face was bright. I'm just trying to make you suffer less. Who are you lying to? For such a small distance, you don't need to speed like that. Chihaya Fukuyama's reaction. Okay, I won't joke around. Su Shenxing put away the smile on his face and became much more serious. Actually, the reason why I ran so fast, other than wanting to confirm something here, is because there are some other reasons. It's not just to torment you. You actually admitted it so openly. Just how evil are you? As soon as Chihaya Fukuyama finished speaking, the nausea and dizziness caused by as if she was stuffed into a washing machine and spun at 50 times the normal speed for more than 10 minutes came again, and she couldn't help but retch again. I already said it's not like that, Su Shenxing sighed and explained to the girl while walking into the depths of the stone mushroom forest. Chihaya Fukuyama, who was holding the stone mushroom and retching, gritted her teeth and quickly followed. In fact, the area around Tianzhu Mountain is said to be divided into many special areas according to different situations. As far as I know, the number of areas has reached or even exceeded 4,500 years ago. Wait a minute, although I haven't learned Chinese for long, doesn't nian mean nian in Chinese? Chihaya Fukuyama interrupted. Oh, Chinese has many meanings. This is the unit of number, similar to thousands and tens of thousands. In terms of what you can understand, nian is about 10 to the 44th power. If there's no problem, I'll continue. Su Shenxing ignored the girl's dumbfounded look and calmly walked on the ground as he spoke. When Su Shenxing and his companions first came to the great demonic realm, with the help of others, they were lucky enough to land in this stone mushroom forest not far from Tianzhu Mountain. At that time, Su Shenxing had just combined the 12 holy swords into the origin sacred sword, and his own strength had not yet reached the peak. Although he also created moves like the brave high-speed rail for fun, and successfully made the word high-speed rail become a synonym for terror in the other world. Some other worlds even used this word as the root of words, giving birth to legends of demons that could move at super high speed. Compared to the high-speed rail of ordinary people now, it was almost the same as a tricycle. In addition, there were other companions that needed to be taken care of, so they walked in this stone mushroom forest for quite a long time. As a result, if the place Su Shenxing was most familiar with in the great demonic realm was the Demon King's castle, then the second most familiar place was undoubtedly this stone mushroom forest. Of course, this is only one of the reasons. Do you know why the great demonic realm divided the area around Tianzhu Mountain into so many areas? Su Shenxing suddenly asked Chihaya Fukuyama. For the convenience of management. The girl replied with uncertainty. Pfft, you're wrong. Su Shenxing made a cross with his hands and taunted in high spirits. Your voice makes people very angry. In fact, in addition to the 9,000 worlds that were made into lattice worlds, there are more worlds that were directly destroyed because their origin power was seized. However, the great demonic realm itself was also distorted because of the fusion of tens of thousands of worlds' origins. The laws of countless worlds collided with each other, giving birth to more and more laws that were more deformed, and these laws would finally appear on this land in the form of freaks. The division of areas I mentioned before did not rely on the size of the land or anything else, but purely on the division of freaks. There is a freak in every area. At this point, even Su Shenxing was a little more serious. The power of the freaks cannot be underestimated. To be honest, although no freak can cause me harm, there are some more disgusting types among them. Even if I was captured by them, it would be a little troublesome. It can't be. Although Chihaya Fukuyama despised Su Shenxing in terms of feelings and thought that this guy was a scumbag with an extremely debauched private life, it was undeniable that this scumbag's strength could be described as abnormal. There was basically nothing on earth that could hurt him. At this time, listening to Su Shenxing's exaggeration of the so-called freaks, he could not help but feel a little incredulous. Unfortunately, it's all true. Su Shinxing smiled slightly, not at all alluring. That's why I crossed other areas as soon as possible and came here directly. First, to find traces of the past, and second, because I understand the freaks here. They won't be an obstacle to our progress. At this point, he stopped and looked ahead. We're here. If I'm not mistaken, this is the place, Su Shinxing muttered in a voice that Chihaya Fukuyama could not hear, the place where I died. Chapter 5:17. But there's nothing here. Chihaya Fukuyama asked curiously. Although there was indeed a large open space in front of them, it was empty. The girl couldn't figure out what Su Shinxing was doing here. The only thing that made Chihaya Fukuyama curious was that the ground of the open space was very flat. Although it was not to the extent that it could reflect a person's figure, it seemed to be paved with artificially cut marble. So she still walked forward curiously, but Su Shinxing grabbed her collar. Don't go over. What's wrong? The girl was stunned and frowned as she looked back at Su Shinxing. Our protagonist didn't answer her question. Instead, he kicked away a stone mushroom that was only as tall as a person's waist. The stone mushroom flew into the open space, and then under Chihaya Fukuyama's horrified gaze, it turned into a pile of flying sand and disappeared into thin air. The young girl sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the seemingly ordinary empty space in surprise. It was only at this moment that she realized that the ground that she thought was paved with stones was actually made up of countless white sand. She didn't know why, but the sand was very flat. If she didn't look carefully, she wouldn't be able to see any clues. This is the strangeness of this area, Su Shinxing explained to her. The strangeness that he and Chihaya Fukuyama talked about before, although some of it was for the purpose of scaring the other party, most of it was the truth. Not to mention that he had just synthesized the Origin sacred sword at this point in time. Even now, if he was caught by some special strangeness, it would be difficult to think of a better way to break free except to destroy the world. For example, that strangeness in another area next to this stone mushroom forest. It was a very strange law. The thinking speed of creatures that entered it would be 300 million times faster than normal, but at the same time, the people caught by this law would not be able to feel all this. In other words, their somatosensory time was still under normal conditions. However, for the average person, the speed of thought and the ability of the body matched. Therefore, if one was caught by this kind of law, even if it was just moving a finger, it would take nearly 10,000 years of somatosensory time. The feeling of being unable to move for an unlimited amount of time was enough to drive any normal person crazy. Even Su Shinxing, who had been captured by that strange law, could only barely keep up with his thoughts by accelerating his body's movements. Although his movements weren't hindered, there was still a very uncomfortable sense of dissonance. After all, although Su Shinxing was immune to all spells, the laws of each world would more or less affect him a little, just like when he was on Earth, he was also affected by gravity. In comparison, the oddities in this stone mushroom forest were much more ordinary. Although many places were normal, there were still many minefields hidden in this stone mushroom forest. These minefields were where the anomalies were located. The anomalies here were also a kind of law. Although the exact nature was unknown, after all, Su Shinxing did not have the ability to observe the law. Su Shinxing, who had been in contact with them many times, could roughly understand that the law seemed to be not allowing matter exceeding a certain size to appear within a range. And that size was probably the size of fine sand. Everything that exceeded that size would be collapsed and decomposed into fine sand by this law. Although it seemed to be more destructive than the one next door, in fact, because this law conflicted with Su Shinxing's own law, it would be resisted by his power and would not cause any harm to him. Of course, that was under normal circumstances. So that's how it is. After listening to Su Shinqing's explanation, the girl nodded as if she understood. Then, as if she had thought of something, she stared. No. I was clearly asking you what you were looking for. Didn't I tell you? Su Shinqing scratched his head. There are two things I'm looking for. One is my corpse, and the other is a ring. These are the only two things that have fallen into the anomalies of this area but have not been turned into sand. Wait, I seem to have heard something very strange. Didn't you hear it clearly? Then I'll say it again. No, I mean, what do you mean by your corpse? You said it as if you were dead. Are you a ghost now? Chihaya Fukuyama sighed and complained. But then she realized that Su Shinqing did not respond to her joke. She turned her head and saw the other party's strange and gloomy expression. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, but there was no smile at all. It was a bone-chilling fake smile. Wait, could it be that you're really... Suddenly, Chihaya Fukuyama felt her scalp go numb. That's right, Su Shinqing's cold voice slowly sounded. I'm really dead. The girl swallowed her saliva unconsciously and widened her eyes. She quietly turned around and tried not to attract Su Shinqing's attention. She slowly retreated as if nothing had happened. Then, Su Shinqing returned to his original lazy expression. But you've been resurrected. The hero's great technique is good. Hey, can I hit you? Go ahead. Su Shinqing spread his hands and had an expression that said, go ahead and hit me. If it works, it's my loss. The girl thought about it and felt that it was not worth it to hurt her hand, so she turned her head and sulked. Su Shinqing stopped teasing her and carefully observed the ground. Sure enough, you can't find my corpse, since Mo Li would materialize himself with the origin sacred sword when he had a nightmare. It was most likely that the dream had not progressed to the stage where he was killed. So he began to focus on looking for the ring. By the way, I can understand why you didn't die after falling in here. But what's with the ring? Is there really something that doesn't turn into sand in this anomaly? Chihaya Fukuyama tried to use his divine power to transform into a water droplet and threw it into the minefield, but it also turned into sand. Who knew what that water droplet had experienced? He suddenly asked in disbelief. Other than the sacred sword in my hand, as long as it contains a law, and the law itself conflicts with the anomaly, and has a higher spiritual level than the anomaly, it can be immune to the effects of the anomaly. That ring is one of them. Su Shinqing showed a nostalgic look and said slowly, and as far as I know, that thing is a self-consistent law ring. Chapter 5:18. Because of the anomaly, the sand was very flat. In theory, if there was a foreign object, it should be easy to find it. But after a while, Su Shinqing still could not find what he was looking for. Could it be that you remembered the wrong place? Maybe it's not here, but in some other minefield or something. Didn't you say that there are many such minefields in this area? Chihaya Fukuyama tried to comfort him. It was the first time she saw Su Shinqing showing such a shaken expression. That's impossible. I can't remember it wrongly. Su Shinqing took a deep breath and stabilized his emotions, but in this way, the nature of this nightmare world is almost clear. If his body was missing, it could be explained by the wrong time. For example, Su Shinqing in this world had not yet challenged the Demon King, but was sent outside because of Mo Li's nightmare. But if even the ring could not be found, then there was no doubt that one thing was clear. This nightmare world was not the same as the previous Earth God's dream world. Because the Earth God's dream was tainted with the power of the gods, coupled with the interference of power at the level of Mo Li, it caused a mimetic relationship between the dream and reality, and even caused a considerable impact on reality. For example, the dragon brother Aoli, who should have disappeared, was still alive even after experiencing the change of the Li River. But this nightmare world was a world created based on Mo Li's cognition. Even if he did something in this world, it could not affect reality. After all, a virtual world simply did not exist. It was quite different from the real history, so it could not replace or affect history. There would not be a situation where the great demonic realm appeared again after Su Xinqing returned to Earth because of what he did here. In addition, the object of Mo Li's dream was the great demonic realm. Even if the great demonic realm was only a world in terms of units, it had absorbed many world origins. Whether it was concept or energy level, it was not on the same level as the world where Earth was. Even Mo Li could not easily affect its existence, not to mention that the current Mo Li only had 30% of his usual power. Then what should we do now? Chihaya Fukuyama said, to be honest, I've had enough of this strange world. In fact, for her to be able to survive until now in the great demonic realm with its dense magic factor, other than her relationship with a god, she herself could already be considered to be gifted. But even so, the young lady gradually felt her chest tightening and breathing becoming difficult. If this continued, she might suffocate soon. Since it's a nightmare, then there must be a source for Mo Li's nightmare. If we can destroy it, then the nightmare will end. Since he found that this was not the real history, Su Xinqing's interest plummeted. His face was dull, and it seemed that he planned to leave here as soon as possible. Your annoyance is too obvious. Chihaya Fukuyama complained. You're so long-winded. I just hate doing useless things. Although Su Xinqing didn't say anything, it wasn't hard to guess what he was going to do. Mo Li was born in the castle on Tianzhu Mountain. Although that girl shouldn't have been born at this time, if there's something in the great demonic realm that can make her have nightmares, it's most likely in that place. Su Xinqing looked at the pillar-like mountain in the distance and said casually. In fact, if it was the original great demonic realm, there should be one more thing that could make Mo Li afraid, and that was the Su Xinqing of this era. Although in the eyes of the current Su Xinqing, he was a good-for-nothing teenager in this era, and because of various reasons, he had no trust in humans and most intelligent creatures. But in fact, he was quite strong with the Origin's sacred sword. As long as the Origin's sacred sword's power of creation flowed back a little, or through some special methods, it wouldn't be difficult to destroy a world. And the Mo Li of this era hadn't been born yet. Even if she had the cognition of this era, she might still be an embryo or something else. Therefore, the Su Xinqing of this era was also fatal to her. But there was no need to worry about this problem, because the Su Xinqing of this time seemed to have been brought to the outside world by Mo Li's nightmares, and was pixelated by old Su himself. Therefore, the only possibility left was that castle. Can we discuss something? After looking at the mountain in the distance, Chihaya Fukuyama's face suddenly changed, and he asked Su Xinqing with a bitter expression. Of course, you don't have to be so afraid. Do I look like such an unreasonable person? Su Xinqing's face showed a very commercial smile. By the way, we won't accept all complaints and bad reviews about the movement method. GUH. What kind of state organ are you? Chihaya Fukuyama said bitterly. Then, are you mentally prepared? Su Xinqing continued to smile, and he didn't care about the girl's resentment that seemed to have a black gas spreading out from her body. Wait, let me take a deep breath first. I should be glad that I didn't eat anything before coming in. 10 minutes later, Chihaya Fukuyama held the wall of Tianzhu Mountain with a pale face and retched at the foot of the mountain. From this point of view, the mountain wall was like an endless huge wall that extended to the other side. You couldn't even feel the slightest curve. If you're done retching, come up, we still have to climb the mountain. Su Xinqing said to the girl who had just finished retching without any pity. Wait. Since your goal is only to destroy the source of nightmares, and the source of nightmares is in the castle at the top of the mountain, Chihaya Fukuyama's face was pale, and she felt that if she continued to retch, she might die in this dream. So she tried to make some suggestions that could alleviate her situation. Then can't you just cut down the mountain? As long as the mountain falls, whether it's the source of nightmares or anything else, they will all die, right? Oh, that's a good idea, but unfortunately, it's not possible. Su Xinqing shrugged. Tianzhu Mountain is an existence that is part of the great demonic realm itself, and there's no way to divide it. If you directly destroy the world, the nightmare itself won't end. Why can't such a big mountain be divided? Chihaya Fukuyama tried to scratch the mountain wall, but she found that her divine power couldn't even remove a small stone from the mountain wall. To explain it in simpler terms, for example, people on Earth can observe very small things, right? Molecules, atoms, electrons, and quarks. Su Xinqing took out a chestnut from somewhere and explained to the girl seriously, if this continues, we will eventually find an existence that is the tiniest of all things and cannot be further divided, right? Tianzhu Mountain is such a thing. Although it's big, one is all, and all is one. Conceptually, it's already an inseparable, basic unit, understand? Why do I feel like I'm being treated as an idiot? The former top student Chihaya Fukuyama looked at the chestnut in Su Xinqing's hand with complicated feelings and was speechless. Chapter 5:19. The door is still intact. After going through a lot of hardships, especially for Chihaya Fukuyama, they came to the top of Tianzhu Mountain. Su Xinqing stared at the towering castle not far away and said in a deep voice. At the front of the castle were two towers that would definitely be a miracle-level scenic spot on Earth. Although they were called towers, in fact, if they were separated from the ridiculously large castle, they could already be regarded as a complete fortress. These two towers were more than 2,000 meters tall. Even with modern technology, there was no way to build these towers. In this castle, they were only used as doorposts. What made people curious and surprised was that the castle door was actually a wooden door. The wood used to make the more than 1,800 meters of complete wooden planks had long become an unsolved mystery. At least on Earth, there was no wood that could withstand such a large weight without breaking. What does this mean? Chihaya Fukuyama, who was slightly more relieved than the dead, still couldn't hold back her curiosity and asked after resting for a moment. This castle itself is also integrated, as if it grew out of Tianzhu Mountain, Su Xinqing explained to her, so the only way to invade is to break in from the front. When I first barged in, I also directly destroyed this door. Ah, so this thing is a door. Chihaya Fukuyama's eyes looked as turbid as a dead fish. After staying in this damn place for so long, by now, I'm not surprised by anything. That's good. Su Xinqing smiled playfully and then kicked the door. Then, the huge wooden door, which was like a mountain, began to gradually crack and collapse from where he kicked it. Although there was a saying that even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of you, the height of Mount Tai was only 1,524 meters, and the vertical height of the wooden door was about 1,800 meters. In terms of the collapse of the wooden door, I'm afraid it would be like this even if Mount Tai really collapsed. Chihaya Fukuyama was naturally frightened by this scene. However, Su Xinqing did not stop there. Instead, he waved his hand casually as countless huge wooden planks fell from the sky, blowing them all away. Hurry up and follow him. It's best to pass through here before all the wooden planks fall off. The road will be blocked later, and it'll be even more troublesome to clean up. As he said this, he walked forward leisurely as giant wooden planks fell from the sky. Whoa! Couldn't you have chosen a more peaceful way to enter? Completely different from Su Xinqing's calm appearance, Chihaya Fukuyama's appearance could be described as covering his head and fleeing like a rat. But the girl was not to be blamed for her cowardice. Any normal person walking in the sky with planks the size of an aircraft carrier falling from the sky would probably behave the same way as the girl. To be honest, because the material of the wooden door was far stronger than steel, in fact, the falling wood was not much different from solid iron of the same size. So in terms of destructive power, it might be a little more destructive than an aircraft carrier, but after rushing out of the collapsed area of the wooden door, a huge open walkway suddenly appeared in front of them. We finally escaped. The girl who survived the disaster sat on the ground, crying, but no tears came out. She was glad that she did not become a meat patty. But then she noticed that Su Xinqing's expression became very strange. It was like a mixture of surprise and confusion, and a little bit of nervousness. "What's wrong?" the girl asked sincerely. "It's strange," Su Xinqing said directly. "I originally thought that Emily was afraid of the final demon king, so I came here to deal with him. But the actual situation seems to be a little more complicated than I thought. Although I don't have any evidence, I can feel that there is an existence in this city that can make me afraid. It can't be." This journey had made Chihaya Fukuyama deeply understand the level of the scumbag in front of her, so when Su Xinqing said the word afraid, she also had a sad face. If there really was someone who was on par with this monster, the aftermath of their fight would be enough to kill her several times over. "I thought it was just a boring journey. I didn't expect to have such a harvest." Su Xinqing looked a little happy and curious. Although this was just a nightmare created by Mo Li, everything in the nightmare came from Mo Li's knowledge. In other words, things that had appeared in the past might not necessarily appear in this dream. Just like the ring in the stone mushroom forest. Because Jasmine did not have any knowledge of what had happened there, it did not exist. But the things that appeared in this dream definitely appeared in the past. Thinking about it this way, there were some strange and inexplicable things when he first entered this castle. For example, the guards in this castle were unexpectedly weak, and the danger level was not even comparable to the monsters at the bottom of Tianzhu. Even he, who only had the origin sacred sword, was able to charge in front of the final demon king. Also, the demon king didn't take the sacred sword in the end, giving Su Xinqing a chance to turn the tables. But at that time, he had already paid the biggest price for his recklessness. Even he died in the great demon realm, so he didn't notice these strange things. He didn't expect that today, he would be able to unravel these mysteries in Mo Li's dream. There was really no more unexpected surprise than this. "If you're afraid, just stay here. I can give you a few buffs, the kind that can guarantee your survival." Su Xinqing seemed to see through the girl's fear and said. "But I refuse," the girl said without hesitation. "Although it's a joke from your hometown, I think it's better if you don't try to be brave." "I'm not trying to be brave." Chihaya Fukuyama stared at Su Xinqing without the slightest bit of confusion. Indeed, the journey ahead would definitely be more terrifying and dangerous than the previous small skirmishes. But even so, Chihaya Fukuyama only hesitated for a moment, and didn't change his decision to continue following Su Xinqing. For her, this dream was because Qin Xingyan entrusted it to her. Although she didn't actually play any role, no matter what, she would work hard to carry out her promise to the end. This was also the girl's persistence. As you wish." Su Xinqing didn't try to persuade her. He just turned and walked towards the seemingly endless corridor. But the corner of his mouth revealed a faint smile. Chapter 520. Sure enough, it was the same as before. They had clearly entered the castle, but the internal defense could be said to be surprisingly weak. Not to mention the current Su Xinqing, even the dragon brother Aoli should be able to break through as long as he was well prepared. But the deeper they went, the more obvious the distinctive aura became. According to the normal walking speed, it would take at least several months or even years to walk from the entrance to the center of the castle. But just like other places in the great demonic realm, the world inside the castle was also distorted, and this distortion was probably deliberately made by the people living in it to facilitate movement. As long as the people walking in it had a clear goal, the castle would deflect the space at the beginning and end of the aisles leading to that area, connecting them together so that people could get to where they wanted to go in the shortest possible distance. Logically speaking, this ability could also be used in defense, so that intruders could only stay in one place forever. But for some reason, whether it was in the past or now, Su Xinxing did not seem to be regarded as an intruder by the castle. The power still provided him with services. "We're here, it's here." After walking for a few hours, an antique metal door appeared in front of the two of them. Although it could not be compared with the wooden door outside, which was more than 1,800 meters high, the height of this door was still enough for the two to look up. The final Demon King, as well as the existence that made Su Xinxing feel a little afraid, was inside. However, just when Su Xinxing put his hands on the door and was about to push it open, something strange happened. Through the sunlight shining through the skylight, it could be seen that the dust that was originally flying in the air had stopped. Along with them, there were also the flames on both sides of the corridor that looked like upside-down towers, and Chihaya Fukuyama, who was blinking halfway. Time stopped. Su Xinxing looked at everything in front of him in amazement, but then he shook his head and denied this speculation. Although Su Xinxing could indeed ignore almost all supernatural effects, which of course included time stop, to be immune to this level of attack, Su Xinxing could still feel it. The current situation was almost certainly different from a normal time stop attack. That's not right. Rather than saying that time has stopped, it's more accurate to say that this dream has stopped. He glanced at Chihaya Fukuyama, who had a funny expression on his face, and seemed to understand something. Emily wouldn't do something like this himself. In other words, the one who did this was the guy inside. The other party's goal was probably to prevent the young girl from entering the hall with them. After all, Su Xinxing dared to guarantee that he would have punched through space and brought the girl back if he had only manipulated space to take her away. Only the ability to make everything stop would make old Su helpless. After all, he was not good at magic and did not know how to dispel curses. However, judging from the fact that the other party only stopped the dream and didn't kill Chihaya Fukuyama, they should still be able to communicate. The feeling of being schemed against made Su Xinxing spit unhappily. The spit shot out faster than the speed of light and blasted a big hole in the wall. "Let me see what the hell you're doing." With this thought of finding fault, Su Xinxing pushed open the metal door and walked into the hall. The hall was just like what he had experienced in the past. There was not the slightest change. The space was wide enough to accommodate more than a dozen football fields. Huge, exquisitely decorated pillars were everywhere, and there were even some treasures that could not be found in other worlds. If this was the real world, Su Xinxing would probably pretend as if nothing had happened and secretly take one or two of them. However, since this was Emily's dream, he could forget about such a good thing. Continuing forward for a while, a luxurious throne that seemed to support the heavens and earth, as well as an extremely tall and sturdy figure wearing dark gold full-body armor and making a posture similar to that of a thinker, gradually emerged from the darkness and appeared in Su Xinxing's vision. In terms of size, Su Xinxing was not even as big as the other party's little toe. "I didn't expect to see this guy again. Although it's not him." When Su Xinxing saw the final Demon King who had killed him once, he couldn't help but sigh. However, as he continued to approach, Su Xinxing's eyebrows gradually frowned. Obviously, he was already so close, but the other party still didn't react. This was obviously not right. Could it be that even this guy was frozen with the dream? The more Su Xinxing thought about it, the more he felt that this was the answer. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But then, he stopped when he was about 2 kilometers away from the giant. Because a little bit in front of the giant stood a figure with his back facing him. The person's height and body shape were not much different from a normal human male. His hair was messy like a hedgehog's head. Other than that, for some reason, he was wearing a white coat. In fact, Su Shinching should have seen the other party earlier, but because of a moment of nostalgia, his attention was focused on the final Demon King. Only now did he notice the person who was much smaller than the final Demon King. That was definitely the person who had brought a certain amount of pressure to Su Shinching from the beginning. Oh. You're finally here. At this time, the other party seemed to have noticed the existence of Su Shinching. While speaking, he slowly turned around. Long time no see. No, for you, this should be the first time we've met. Su Shinching stared at the person in front of him, frowning even harder. Although the other party was wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses and had heavy eye bags and dark circles under his eyes, the decadence of the other party was far beyond Su Shinching himself. He also looked a lot older than Su Shinching, and there were more or less other differences, but with that appearance, there was no doubt that the other party was also Su Shinching. Don't be so vigilant. Don't worry, I don't have any hostility toward you. I believe you can see that, right? The other party smiled slightly. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Avalon, the other you. You're not the existence in this dream, are you? Although he had doubts just now, Su Shinching was almost certain of it now, judging from the other party's way of speaking and attitude. No, strictly speaking, my existence is indeed the person in the dream, but the essence is different. Do you know about the spell called Spirit Descent? My current state is more or less like that. From a faraway place, my consciousness has descended upon the me in this dream. The other party said cheerfully. What exactly are you? Su Shinching became even more vigilant. Well, to put it in a simpler way, I'm the you of another world. Although there's no direct contact before, you've also indirectly encountered a similar existence, haven't you? For example, the you who sent your disciple back to the present from 10 years in the future. See that as World Line Alpha. Because of your disciple's efforts, your actions have changed the history that was originally going to happen. According to the current development of the situation, the you in 10 years will definitely become a different person. This is the branch of the world. Your actions have caused the appearance of a new world line, which I'll call World Line Beta for the time being. So, will World Line Alpha disappear because of the appearance of World Line Beta? The other party spoke eloquently, clearly not intending to wait for Su Shinching's answer. Obviously not. And my relationship with you is similar to the you of World Line Alpha who sent your disciple back to 10 years in the past, and the current you of World Line Beta, although our branch appeared earlier. That being said, we're still the same person, and our tastes should be similar in the beginning. I believe you've also used names like Shi Wei in another world, haven't you? Did you show up here just to tell me these nonsensical things? Su Shinching did not answer. He straightened out his mind and found that it was still a little messy, so he decided not to care about the nonsensical things, and went straight to the point to ask about the other party's intentions. I say, this doesn't seem like the attitude you're showing your savior. The person who called himself Shi Wei sighed. Savior. Who do you think brought your corpse and that cursed sword out when you were instantly killed by this guy? The other party pointed at the giant behind him with a thumb. The reason I appeared in this dream is because I left an impression on that unborn girl. By the way, you didn't even come to help me when I was instantly killed. What kind of savior is that? Su Shinching complained. Still, his tone was much better. First, I'm not from this world and can't affect it too much. Second, if I really did help back then, would you have grown to what you are now? Su Xinxing was left speechless, and then frowned. So, what are you here for? I'm here to warn you. The other party's smile faded, and a serious look appeared on his rather dispirited face. The world is about to be destroyed. Su Xinxing thought to himself that this should be a serious moment, but for some reason, his heart was not moved at all. Then, he came to a realization. Perhaps it was because he had heard about the world being destroyed so many times at home that he was a little numb. What's with that expression? The other party could not help asking when he saw Su Xinxing's awkward expression. No, I'm just wondering if you're joking with me. Su Xinxing scratched his head. It would be too easy for someone who could make him feel a little pressured to destroy one or two worlds. I see, but you've misunderstood me a little. To be precise, the multiverse you're in is about to be completely destroyed. Everything that has form and substance would be utterly destroyed. Then, this world line would be reduced to nothingness, and even you would not be able to stop it. You could only regret your powerlessness in the endless void, and finally give up your existence. The other party spoke slowly. You're not scaring me, are you? Su Xinxing said suspiciously. Do you think I'm scared? Back then, the great demonic realm had harmed hundreds of thousands of worlds, and that was already a disaster. Su Xinxing was born because of that disaster and destroyed the great demonic realm. But now, the other party said that almost infinite worlds in this multiverse would be destroyed. That was too exaggerated. Unfortunately, I didn't mean to scare you. The other party shook his head, and his mature yet dispirited face was full of bitterness. Because I'm the one who experienced it personally. I couldn't protect my world. Impossible. What kind of disaster could cause such destruction? Sorry, I'm a failure. I don't even have the right to tell you the true face of the era of destruction. When the other party said the words era of destruction, Su Xinxing felt as if something had slammed into his heart. A moment later, he felt a warm sensation on his face. He reached out and wiped it, only to find that his nose had begun to bleed. Now you understand, don't you? Even if you mention the name of that disaster, it would cause considerable harm to those who know about it. That's why I stopped this dream and didn't let the girl beside you get involved. The other party smiled bitterly. You said that the entire multiverse would be reduced to nothingness, and that even we could only regret and commit suicide in the void, but aren't you still alive? Su Xinxing asked as he wiped away the blood from his nose. Because my luck was better. In my world line, after everything turned into nothingness, my wife's body, which I tried my best to protect, turned into a small world. Su Xinxing did not know why, but the desolate look on the other party's face made Su Xinxing feel sad. Warning the other us and rebuilding the small world of Vina are the only two things that keep me alive. Then, is there really no way to avoid that disaster? In truth, Su Xinxing was confident that he could survive any disaster, but he did not have the confidence to protect the world. If he really was like the other party, where every world and everything he valued was reduced to nothingness, Su Xinxing really did not have the confidence to rise again. If I have to say it, it's not that there's no way at all. After a moment of silence, the other party slowly said, I've informed many of us about the calamity, but those us were unable to resist it in the end. They either died in the calamity or lost everything. But there is one exception. You should have guessed that the branching of our world line happened at the moment of transmigration. Because of the different worlds we transmigrated to, there were innumerable branches. According to my research, the other world lines would be retracted at the time of the calamity and be severed from then on, returning to nothingness. However, there was one world line that not only successfully hid itself, but even the world lines that branched from it were also hidden, avoiding the calamity. The other party sighed. If one day you meet an bus with the pseudonym Seve Adrian, try asking him for advice on what to do, so your taste is about the same, I say, is that what's worth caring about? Oh, actually, other than this, I have something else to ask you. Su Shinxing blinked and looked at the other party. Is Immerse having nightmares because of you? Yeah, if I have to say it, it has something to do with it. The other party did a double take before answering. Oiler. Su Shinxing promptly punched him in the face. However, the other party did not react quickly either, catching Su Shinxing's fist in the same instant. However, the aftershock of the punch immediately passed through the fist. The final Demon King behind the other party directly took the aftershock of the punch with his face. Almost as soon as the aftershock spread out, the Demon King's body was directly vaporized by the power of the aftershock, and its armor was completely melted. In just a breath, the final Demon King that had killed Su Shinxing in an instant, and later made Su Shinxing fight a bitter battle, along with its throne, disappeared from the great demonic realm just like that. Then, the aftershock of Su Shinxing's punch spread out with a bang, punching through the entire castle behind the other party, creating a hole that was more than a few hundred kilometers long, through which the sky outside could be seen. After all, the castle itself was a part of Heaven's pillar, and in theory, it was an absolutely inseparable, fundamental particle, but it still collapsed under Su Shinxing's punch. There was no doubt that this punch was the extent of Su Shinxing's seriousness. So, isn't your way of repaying your benefactor a little too strange? The other party, who was unscathed, held his fist with a playful expression and said, "How much strength does this projection of yours have?" Su Shinxing ignored the other party's teasing, still maintaining his punching posture, and asked the other party. "About half." "So, you're stronger than me." Su Shinxing frowned. "After all, I'm already the only person left in that world line. In addition, you're the fastest growing us I've ever seen. Although there are some unexpected factors, the title of monster can be given to you without any dispute." The other party smiled slightly. "About another year, you'll be able to catch up to me." Tisk! Su Shinxing withdrew his fist, then turned around, no longer looking at the other party's invisible pretentious face. "In short, I'm tired of this nightmare world, let it end quickly." "Of course, my purpose from the beginning was only to pass on the information about that disaster to you." The other party replied without hesitation. "And I'm different from you." Su Shinxing stopped and said in a deep voice, "I'll definitely protect the world and not let the things I value disappear before my eyes a second time." The other party was slightly stunned at first, then looked at Su Shinxing's back and smiled. That's the best." Then, the nightmare world collapsed. However, she was still a young girl in her late 20s, and Su Shinxing had never killed any creatures in front of her. Now that she saw the death of a person who lived under the same roof as her friend, she naturally felt a little emotional. Compared to her, Su Shinxing, who was used to seeing storms and waves, was much calmer. It took him almost a moment to judge that although the girl's situation was not good, and if this happened to a normal person, they would probably die hundreds of times. However, the girl seemed to be hanging on by a thread for some reason and would not die easily. In short, let's continue to let time continue to flow. Su Shinxing took out the glass bowl. After negotiating with the people inside through his incarnation, he used the sword of truth to put the earth back on the timeline. After all, if the earth could not return to the normal flow of time and everything outside was still, Su Shinxing would not be able to save the girl. Now, there are 3 ways to save her. After doing all this, Su Shinxing breathed a sigh of relief, and then said in a clear voice. "What ways?" When Chihaya Fukuyama heard that not only did Su Shinxing have a way, but he also had as many as 3 ways, he calmed down and relaxed a little. "The first way is also the simplest." Su Shinxing hesitated for a moment, then said seriously, "First, I'll kill her first." "Hey! Don't worry, listen to me first. Su Shinqing also knew that his statement was a little ridiculous, but he still continued, then, I'll step into the underworld, rescue her, and complete the resurrection process. He spread his hands and said, because I'm not good at healing, I'll just skip the treatment and directly resurrect her on the spot. Won't that work? That won't work at all. This idea is too bad. Chihaya Fukuyama shook his head like a rattledrum. Can't you think of a more normal way? There are normal ways. Su Shinqing pointed at the bed next to him, well, to be precise, Emily who was on the bed. Just wait for Emily to wake up. Although she doesn't know much about healing magic, she can still use some of the more common healing magic. When the time comes, we'll have to bribe her with a lot of snacks. Miss Xingyan can't wait that long. Chihaya Fukuyama complained. Qin Xingyan was already on the verge of death. God knows how long it would take for Emily to wake up. What if she passes away before then? I'll step into the underworld. Can you stop using this joke? Su Shinqing thought to himself, it's just a world of the underworld. Don't talk about asking for a person, even if I'm a little more serious, it won't be difficult for me to rush into the underworld. How can this be considered a joke? If the underworld of this world knew about this, they would probably curse out loud, Motherf ***, when did I provoke you? Other than that, is there any other more reliable way? Chihaya Fukuyama continued to ask with a tired face. Other than the experience in the Great Devil Realm that made her physically tired, the slow progress of the conversation with Su Shinqing also made her mentally tired. Then there's only one left. Su Shinqing spread his hands innocently. Let's go find reinforcements. What? There's a different dimension on Earth called Kunlun, Su Shinqing continued. It used to be a portal to the heavenly realm, but now the heavenly realm is sealed, so Kunlun has become a secret realm with richer spiritual energy compared to the mortal world. Many rare and exotic beasts are entrenched there. What does this have to do with our topic? Looking at Su Shinqing's lecherous appearance, Chihaya Fukuyama felt even more tired. In Kunlun Mountain, there's a Baizai. Su Shinqing finally threw out the main topic. That guy claims to know everything from the past to the future. If that's the case, it shouldn't be difficult for him to treat Xingyan, right? With that said, Su Shinqing carried Qin Xingyan in his arms and pretended to walk out of the room. Wait a minute, I want to go too. Chihaya Fukuyama hurriedly followed, but was stopped by Su Shinqing. Xingyan and I aren't at home, Emily is recuperating in bed. Now, the most powerful person in this family is you. Everything in Sakura apartment is in your hands. He said with a face full of righteousness, causing the young girl to suddenly feel dizzy with a sense of mission. Since you've said so, then leave it to me. I won't let anyone barge in. She put her hands on her hips and said with a serious face. Although Su Shinqing wanted to remind her that she seemed to have used the wrong idiom, he felt that it was very interesting, so he simply held back his laughter and left Sakura apartment. By the time Chihaya Fukuyama realized that Su Shinqing meant to let her guard the door, it was already after the dog girl curiously circled around her for a long time. Chapter 522. He went to Kunlun to find Baizai and ask how to cure Qin Xingyan. Although it was a very simple thing in the past, it was a bit troublesome for Su Shinqing now. In the past, if he wanted to go to a certain place, he just needed to follow Emily's instructions and cut open the space according to Emily's instructions. However, now that Emily was sick in bed, it was very difficult for Su Shinqing to cut out the passage to Kunlun. In the other world, he practiced for 10 years to be able to cut the timeline accurately and send his disciple to a fixed time. Although it was much easier to go to a certain place than to travel through time, it would take Su Shinqing a long time to get the hang of it. But it was not impossible to solve this problem. In fact, Su Xinxing did not ask for much. He just needed the coordinates of the secret land in Kunlun. Therefore, he carried Qin Xingyan on his back and ran to the Taoist temple built by the Bailu temple not far from Jiangjin. There was probably no one on earth who knew more about the secret land in ancient myths and legends than these cultivation sects that had been passed down since ancient times. The master of the Bailu temple branch was an old Taoist priest called Bade Virtue. His name sounded like a monk. However, although he had white hair, a beard that reached his lower abdomen, and he wore a loose Taoist robe, he looked like an immortal. In fact, he was in the same generation as Qin Xingyan. Because he was not a core disciple, he was even inferior to Qin Xingyan in terms of status. When they saw Su Xinxing running into the Taoist temple with a half-dead person on his back, they thought he was going to the wrong place to cause a medical dispute. However, when they saw the girl on Su Xinxing's back who was disfigured but whose original appearance could be vaguely seen, the master of the Bade Virtue temple gasped. In the previous incident of the Ro Owl in Jiangjin, the girl presided over the situation as the top fighter of the Bailu temple branch. After several battles with the Ro Owl clone, the disciples of the branch saw the strength of the most powerful person in the modern cultivation world and were in awe of her. However, now the all-powerful girl had become like this. Naturally, the people in the branch were frightened and thought some great demon had appeared in the world again. He was not qualified to practice in the main hall of the Bailu temple. When Su Xinxing made a scene in the Bailu temple and even sent the main hall flying into the stratosphere, he was just playing dead outside. Therefore, the master of the Bade Virtue temple was not familiar with Su Xinxing's face and did not recognize him at once. He just thought Su Xinxing was a kind-hearted person passing by. After asking him to put down the girl, he planned to give him some money and send him away. Su Xinxing wanted to throw the money back at the master of the Bailu temple, but when he counted the money and found it was a lot, he stuffed the money into his pocket as if nothing had happened. Then he called the people in the Taoist temple and asked them to contact the main hall of the Bailu temple. Old Su didn't believe that these guys didn't have a way to contact the main hall of the Bailu temple. In this information age, they should at least have the mobile phone number of the master of the temple, right? Fortunately, these people were cultivators after all. They didn't disgrace the ancient cultivators of the Celestial Empire. They really made QQ video chat for Su Xinxing. They took out a yellow copper basin from behind the table where the statues of the three pure ones were enshrined. Then they scooped several ladles of water from the big vat outside with the yellow and shriveled gourd ladle which was said to be made of gourds grown from white jade vines. They filled the copper basin with the so-called rootless water. Su Xinxing even saw a few larvae in it with his excellent eyesight. After doing all this, the master of the Bade Virtue temple asked the disciples to sit on the other side of the copper basin in a 7-star formation. Finally, he threw a white jade stone into the copper basin. Suddenly, a burst of smoke rose. Then the old face of the current master of the Bailu temple whom Su Xinxing had seen before appeared in the white smoke. To be honest, it was more convenient to use the QQ video chat with such a lousy special effect after so much trouble. In addition, Su Xinxing also found seasoning foam on the old man's beard, just like the one on the spicy sticks. Could it be that this guy was eating spicy sticks just now? What do you want to report? Yes. The old man seemed to have noticed that there was something on his beard. He stroked his beard and thought that he had wiped away the seasoning foam without anyone noticing. Then he said calmly, "They are not the ones who are in trouble." Just when the master of the Bade Virtue temple wanted to report the matter of Qin Xingyan, Su Xinxing pushed him away and walked forward from behind. "It's me." "Damn, Jinx Su." "Ahem, Benefactor Su, why are you looking for me?" "Yes." The other party turned pale with fright and subconsciously made a move to flip the table over. But perhaps he thought that the consequences of doing so would be even more serious. so he immediately recovered and changed from his previous aloof immortal-like appearance to an amiable one. This change in attitude stunned the master of the Bade Virtue Temple, who was about to throw a tantrum. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and his whole body trembled even more. He bent down carefully and silently, trying his best not to attract Su Shinxing's attention, and sneaked into the Three Pristines Temple to hide. He also prayed for the Three Pristines in his heart and prayed for blessings. Su Shinxing naturally did not notice this. Or rather, even if he did, he would not care. Xingyan was seriously injured because of some mistakes of mine. I plan to go to the Kunlun secret realm to treat her. Do you have any documents that record the location of the Kunlun secret realm? He asked straightforwardly. Although I do, according to what I know, the Kunlun secret realm was closed 300 years ago and is no longer open to the public. Ha! The master of the Bade Virtue Temple was stunned for a moment before he replied, also, if it's just an ordinary injury that needs treatment, we have a lot of spiritual herbs and miraculous medicines in the Bailu Temple. However, before he could finish his sentence, Su Shinxing heard a commotion from the other side. The master of the Bade Virtue Temple was enraged and roared in the direction of the commotion. The gist of it was that he wanted them to be quiet. Otherwise, the main temple would be destroyed again. However, a moment later, the master of the Bade Virtue Temple's expression turned even uglier. He looked at Su Shinxing as if he could not suppress his anger. Demon Su, Benefactor Su, what did you do to Xingyan? Why did her life tablets suddenly rot? Judging from your tone, it doesn't make a difference whether you change your words or not, right? I already said that she was seriously injured. That's why I plan to go to the Kunlun secret realm. It's too late, the life tablet is rotten. There's no cure. The master of the Bade Virtue Temple, who was gnashing his teeth at Su Shinxing a moment ago, probably felt that he would never be able to defeat Su Shinxing in this lifetime and that there was no hope for him to take revenge. He looked extremely dejected. What do you know? Just give me the thing. Sigh, I will send the thing you want to the Three Pristines Temple. Benefactor, take care of yourself. The master of the Bade Virtue Temple, who had lost his beloved disciple, seemed to have aged several decades in an instant. He was originally full of vigor and vitality, but now he looked like a skinny old man. After saying this, the master of the Bade Virtue Temple waved his hand and disappeared into the smoke. Su Shinxing glanced at the smoke before slowly walking into the Three Pristines Temple. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, who was sitting in the middle, opened his mouth strangely like a puppet and spat out a jade slip the size of a goose egg. Is this how you treat the gods you respect? No wonder modern times can't beat Buddhism. The master of the virtuous temple, who was sitting in the corner, obviously did not notice Su Shinxing walking in. He was still holding his head and praying when the jade slip hit him in the head. Oh, the Three Pristines above, are you waiting for a response? He excitedly held up the jade slip, but before he could check the contents, it was snatched away by Su Shinxing. The master of the Bade Virtue Temple was angry at first, but when he saw that it was Su Shinxing, he immediately became listless. After Su Shinxing got the jade slip, he found that he did not have any spiritual power to check it, so he simply stuffed it into the hands of the master of the virtuous temple. Read the contents out for me. The master of the virtuous temple suddenly felt like a piece of burning coal was stuffed into his hands. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 523. According to the Jade Scroll, the Kunlun secret realm had indeed been closed. As for the reason for its closure, Su Shinxing had actually learned about it before. In the Desolate Era, the heavenly realm and the human realm were actually connected through Mount Buzhou. At that time, Kunlun was just a towering mountain. As the saying goes, a mountain is not high because of the presence of an immortal. In the desolate era, Kunlun was actually where the West Queen Mother's palace was located. However, unlike the other mythical figures who liked to stir up trouble at that time, the West Queen Mother was more of a homebody type. In order to save the human realm, when Hou-Yi shot down the 9 sons, she was afraid that he would be killed by the angry East Emperor, so she specially ordered the Enchanting bird to pass down a decree for Hou-Yi to come to Kunlun and give him the immortal elixir. Other than that, the West Queen Mother almost did not participate in any major mythical events. It was not until Mount Buzhou collapsed and heaven and earth separated that she escaped to the heavenly realm with the Enchanting bird. At that time, the Heavenly Emperor requisitioned Mount Kunlun and made it the last gateway to the heavenly realm. However, 700 years ago, the Tongtian River that was connected to Kunlun was cut off. It was almost impossible for the human realm to go to Kunlun. About 300 years ago, Kunlun officially announced its closure. Since then, there had been no news of Kunlun in the human realm. In Su Xinxing's opinion, the Kunlun secret realm did not really close in the sense that he had been to Kunlun several times. During those trips, he had seen many things that obviously did not exist 300 years ago. For example, tablets and the like. However, now was not the time to argue about this point. Qin Xingyan's condition was very bad. The girl who was already on the verge of death was now losing her body temperature. Su Xinxing carried her in his arms and strode out of the Bailu temple. Seeing that the master of the virtuous temple did not dare to stop him, the disciples naturally did not have the courage to provoke the ferocious old Su. Not long after, Su Xinxing found Brother Dragon in the Earth Temple, who was discussing something with the Earth Lowly. Although I don't expect you to be polite, as Jiang Jin's guardian, can't you knock on the door before coming in? Because she had a close personal relationship with Mo Li, as one of the few supernatural creatures who was not particularly afraid of Su Xinxing, the lowly looked at Su Xinxing and said helplessly. The door fell down when I knocked. Can you be any more fake? Ignoring the lowly, Su Xinxing looked at Ao Li and asked straightforwardly. Where are the ruins of the Heavenspan River? What, brother, why are you looking for that? Brother Dragon, who hadn't come back to his senses, asked in a daze. Then he noticed the girl in Su Xinxing's arms. After a while, Ao Li tried to persuade him with kind words, Brother, although you have outstanding talent and strength, it's better not to abandon you. Where's the little girl who was always by your side? Su Xinxing almost kicked this tasteless dragon out of the solar system. He patiently explained the cause and effect of the incident to the two of them in a very short and concise manner. Then the two people, or two gods, understood the seriousness of the matter. If it's convenient, can I take a look? The lowly asked Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing hesitated for a moment, then carefully put the girl in his arms on the lowly's rattan chair. At this time, Qin Xingyan was almost no different from a dead person. Her face was pale, her hands and feet were cold, her breathing was so weak that it was almost impossible to feel, and her pulse was almost non-existent. The lowly's little hand emitted a warm white light and brushed Qin Xingyan's body. At this moment, the lowly's body emitted a kind and holy glow like the mother of all things. It was only at this time that Su Xinxing had the feeling of, so this guy is really a god. Specks of light separated from the lowly's palm and slowly merged into the girl's body. However, this did not have any effect. Qin Xingyan's condition did not show any signs of improvement. After a short while, the lowly finally stopped and shook her head. No, she can't even absorb the spiritual power directly extracted from the veins of the earth. This is one of the most gentle spiritual powers in the world. It can't even nourish her meridians. Then she raised her head and looked at Su Xinxing. You'd better be mentally prepared. Looks like I really have to make some preparations. I'll have to break into the underworld later. Su Xinxing muttered in his heart. Also, I don't know if it's because they made a mistake. The lowly hesitated when she said this, as if she did not know whether to say it or not, but in the end, she sighed and continued, although this girl's cultivation is indeed not bad, she seems to be the only one in this generation who can touch the edge of the Jean Dan stage at such a young age. But the problem is that there seems to be something wrong with her soul. Logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to live past the age of 12. That's right, Qin Xingyan's soul was indeed incomplete. In the past, she was still a weak and sickly child. Later, after receiving the gift of the green bird, she became healthy and her path of cultivation was much smoother than others. This is the first time I've seen such a special situation. To be honest, after her death, I'm not even sure if her soul will go to the underworld. No, I should say that I'm not even sure if her soul is a real one. The lowly's words stunned Su Xinqing. Then, he thought of a problem that he had not thought about until now. If Qin Xingyan's soul really only went to the underworld after her death, then why didn't the other him who sent Apricot Blossom directly go to the underworld after Qin Xingyan's death and barge into the underworld to ask for her? Why did he spend 10 years painstakingly cutting off the timeline? If Qin Xingyan's soul would directly dissipate after her death because of the uniqueness of her soul, then what should he do? Should he practice cutting off the timeline like the other him who blamed himself for 10 years? I don't mean to look down on you, but as the earth god of Jiangjin, I've seen and experienced many of my friends pass away. No matter how reluctant I am, this is the law of nature. When it's time to let go, let go. After you've experienced it many times, you'll naturally become numb. Seeing Su Xinqing's appearance, the lowly sighed and persuaded, this is the sorrow of immortals. In the past, when he was far from being as strong as he was now, Su Xinqing had also sent away many of his comrades and friends. But no matter how many times he got used to it, he could not get used to it. It was probably because of the stimulation of that time that when Su Xinqing obtained power, he subconsciously wanted to protect the people around him, because he no longer wanted to experience the regret of being separated by life and death. If I'm not mistaken, brother, you're looking for the ruins of the Heavenly River to find a way to go to the Kunlun secret realm through the ruins, right? At this time, Aoli, who had been silent all this time, suddenly asked. Yes, that's right. Hearing this, Su Xinqing nodded vigorously. But to be honest, even if I take you to find the ruins of the Heavenly River, you can't enter Kunlun with that. The Heavenly River was not a secret place in the remote antiquity age. After the Heavenly River was cut off, there would definitely be many demons, ghosts, and even human cultivators looking for the lost treasures inside, as well as the way to Kunlun. Aoli explained to Su Xinqing, unfortunately, although some people occasionally found some lost treasures in the ruins, no one has ever found a way to go to the Kunlun secret realm. After all, 700 years have passed, and what should be discovered has long been excavated. Su Xinqing fell silent again. His intuition told him that Aoli was not lying. If the ruins of the Heavenly River were really useful, then why was there no record of anyone successfully entering Kunlun since 700 years ago? But even so, if you want to go to Kunlun, it's not impossible. Just when Su Xinqing felt a burst of bitterness in his heart and wanted to use the last method to try his luck and find Kunlun by blindly chopping a few times, Aoli suddenly said. Actually, that method isn't that difficult. You should have had similar experiences in the past. Aoli said, then stretched out his finger and wrote 2 words out of thin air. Tram. Chapter 524. After being reminded by Aoli, Su Xinqing remembered this matter. At the peak of Kunlun, there was a wonderful tram that was said to have been built with the help of a demon. Although the tram itself was not very powerful, it did have a very magical ability to travel through space and go to some secret realms that were absolutely impossible to reach by normal means. Even Su Xinqing had used this tram to go to some places he had never been to, But isn't the tram itself in Kunlun? It doesn't seem realistic to go up from other places. Su Shinxing frowned and said, even if it goes to the same secret realm, doesn't the tram stop at a different place every time? No, the important thing is actually not the tram, but the thing that can carry the tram. Ao Li slowly shook his head and continued. His words once again made Su Shinxing fall into deep thought. Indeed, although he didn't think much about it before and didn't notice anything wrong, now that he thought about it carefully, the fact that he took the tram to go to other places was somewhat strange. It should be known that Su Shinxing was almost immune to all magic. If the tram was really a carrier of some kind of magic, then when Su Shinxing sat on it, its effect should be affected. Even in the most optimistic situation, the tram would just drive away, and Su Shinxing would be left alone in the same place, confused. Combined with Ao Li's words, it was not difficult for Su Shinxing to come to a conclusion. In fact, the tram that could go to various secret realms in this world was not very special, except that it could not be destroyed by the power of space travel. The really important and magical thing was the track under the tram. Why do you know this kind of thing? Su Shinxing could not help but frown and ask Ao Li, because when I was cultivating in the secret realm of the Dragon Clan in the East Sea, I accidentally saw some strange lines. Recently, with the improvement of my strength, I vaguely understood that there was a track in the interlayer of this world that could move freely like a living creature. Later, I heard about the tram from some aliens, and figured out the truth of that thing. Ao Li seemed to know that Su Shinxing would be interested in the source of his information. He spread out his hands and answered without reservation, in the words of the human world, the interlayer of that world should be something similar to a higher dimensional space, just like the obstacles drawn on a piece of paper will not hinder us in the three-dimensional world. No matter how hidden and difficult the secret realms in our world are, it is meaningless to the existence of a higher dimension. Su Shinxing immediately pretended to understand his expression. In short, as long as you can find the tram track, you can go to Kunlun through that thing. In theory, yes, but if it's you, it's better to find a medium for transportation. Ao Li nodded, then paused for a moment, and said, I remember that you seem to be able to ignore magic. Although the structure of the track is quite mysterious, it's better for you to not touch it physically, just in case. If the track is destroyed by your ability, it will be troublesome. That's true. Su Shinxing also nodded in a serious manner. At this time, he already had a candidate in mind for a carrier medium. Then he began to think again. He had taken the tram to the Cladric Sea, the moon, and the vegetable market in the south of the city. Among them, he got off halfway at the vegetable market. If Ao Li said that the track could move like a living creature, then even if he went back there, he probably wouldn't find the track. Only the few stations marked in the text on the Kunlun platform would definitely have tracks. At this time, his eyes lit up, and he looked at Ao Li. The latter smiled bitterly. If you want to ask about the secret realm of the Dragon Clan in the East Sea, it's better to give up on this idea. Ha! Is it the rule that other races and dogs are not allowed to enter the forbidden land of the Dragon Clan again? Su Shinxing asked discontentedly. Although there was such a rule in the past, that's not what I meant. Ao Li rubbed his dragon horns awkwardly. More than a year ago, humans built an offshore natural gas mining station in the East China Sea. The drill bit of that thing dug through the East China Sea's arcane realm. At that time, the arcane realm collapsed, and the Kunlun orbit naturally ceased to exist. How fragile are the facilities of the Dragon Clan? Su Shinxing was a little speechless. Aren't the wild monsters almost extinct because of your destruction of the environment? Ao Li said with a bitter heart look, most of the Dragon Clan on our side died, and the whole clan withered. Only my cousin and I are left, and my cousin is still being a pet over there. When the secret realm of the East Sea collapsed, I didn't even know about it. I was still pretending to be green to teach the young people how to protect the old and instigate the masses to attack the chemical plant upstream. Suddenly, Su Xinxing, as a human, felt a subtle sense of guilt in his heart. However, compared to the safety of Qin Xingyan, this sense of guilt was immediately blown away. Other than the bookkeeper, there were no other creatures in the Quadric Sea, and generally, no one would go there. Since he could not count on the useless dragon clan and the land, there was only one choice left. Although for ordinary people, it was indeed difficult to enter the Guanghan's secret realm, fortunately, Jiang Jin happened to have an heir of the Guanghan's secret realm. Anyway, thank you, brother dragon. Old Su waved at him. I'll treat you to grilled gluten next time. I feel that the scale of your treat is getting more and more stingy. Is it an illusion? Because Sakura apartment was in a mess, it would definitely cost a lot of money to repair it later. Su Xinxing muttered in his heart. Then, he hugged Qin Xingyan and jumped directly out of the land temple. Don't just casually open a hole in other people's house. Let them through the door. The landlady waved her short little hands and protested, but of course, she was ignored by Su Xinxing, who had already jumped far away. Aoli took a sip of tea and looked at the big hole in the ceiling. I think you should be glad that after he came, there's still so much of the ceiling left. However, just as Aoli finished speaking, there was a plop sound, and Su Xinxing fell from the sky again. Thus, there was another hole in the land temple. Su Xinxing did not feel anything. He turned his head and looked at the landlady. Oh right, I forgot to ask where Chang Shaoxian lives. I'll give you the address. Apologize to me before that. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.